really? Was it the Zoom part?
Yeah, it was the Zoom part. You had to upgrade to like 5.0 or something. It only took like a few seconds.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't have me do it.
Well, you're probably already updated.
Could be. Yeah, because I got a brand new computer. It's not a laptop.
All right. So I'm on. Phew. Was
Commissioner Emmerich had to do the same thing, he said.
All righty. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, great. All righty, Miss Heather, sorry about that. I didn't realize I had to do an update, and why am I so dark? But that's okay. I'm ready. You are.
We're ready.
Fantastic. All right, guys, it is now 1:01 on Thursday, June 4th, and I do call this commission meeting to order. Let's go ahead and do roll call. Vice Mayor?
Present.
Commissioner Hanks?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Carrison?
Here.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Here.
And Mayor McDowell is also here. So so we do have our quorum. We have City Attorney Slayton, City Manager Lear, and Miss Taylor, our City Clerk, and City Manager who from the Police Department joining us today.
Let's see. I believe the chief is on here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you got Deputy Chief, I know.
Yep, the deputy chief is definitely on.
Fantastic. All righty. So
chief is off today.
Our charter officers are here. Our police officers are here. And I am going to turn this over to the city to do her usual blurb, unless you want me to do the pledge first.
It's your choice, Mayor. I'm happy to continue.
Just go ahead and do yours, and then we'll do the pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. In accordance with the Governor's Executive Order 20-69 and the City Manager's Emergency Order number 2020-06 revised, this is a virtual meeting with elected officials, charter officers, the city staff participating through video conferencing using Zoom, which is a form of communications media technology. If there are any technical difficulties that prevent the use of Zoom for the conduct of the meeting must be recessed or adjourned until the problems have been corrected. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, City Hall is closed to the public. Information about ways to watch the live stream and provide public comment are posted on the city's website at cityofnorthport.com/online meetings. It's also posted on the front windows of City Hall and attached to the agenda for each meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live on the city's website, live on YouTube, accessible on video via Zoom, and accessible by telephone via Zoom. To provide public comment, submit a written comment via the online public comment form on the city's website at cityofnorthport.com/public comment. The form becomes active at 9 a.m. the day before each meeting and will be deactivated at the end of public comment during the meeting. Public comment may also be made by leaving a voicemail message via telephone at 941-429-1032. Voicemail messages are accepted the day before the meeting from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. Required information is referenced on the online form and in the outgoing voicemail message. Comments meeting these requirements that are timely submitted will be accepted and included in the official record of the meeting. Any comment received that does not meet the public comment requirements will be rejected and will not be included in the official record of the meeting. Mayor, in my opinion, these measures satisfy all applicable legal requirements.
Thank you, City Attorney. Appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And if Commissioner Hanks, you could please lead us.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry, I forgot my mute was on.
Figured that. All righty. So, City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
You have to approve the agenda first.
Oh, yeah, I guess we do. I'm just all discombobulated. I'm sorry. All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
A motion on the floor by Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich to approve the agenda as presented. Anything to that, anyone?
No, ma'am.
We'll go ahead and do voice vote. Vice Mayor,
Yes.
Commissioner Emmerich,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks,
Yes.
and Commissioner Carasone.
Yes.
And I'm also yes, so the agenda has been approved. All right, let's move on to public comment. Is that you, City Clerk?
No public comment.
Thank you very much. So now we have presentations. First presenter is Miss Virginia Haley from the Visit Sarasota County. I don't know if she's able to be brought up.
Move her up right now.
Fantastic. Ms. Haley, hi, welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I just had to turn lights on because it is just pouring here by our office. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioners, for giving me the opportunity to give you a quick update on the very dramatic happenings in the tourism industry. To start with, I have to say for this fiscal year, through February, we were breaking records for tourism. And that's the good news. And I think with the bad news to follow, it's important to remember we're coming from a very strong place. And we're hopeful that's going to carry us as we come out of this. But we did see the tale of two different Marches. The first couple of weeks in March, we had very high occupancy, very strong rates in our lodging. And by the end of March, the hotel occupancy was in the low teens. It's important to remember that here in Sarasota County, vacation rental properties make up almost half the revenue that's collected in tourist tax. And so in April, when the governor closed down the vacation rentals, it really made a big difference. And so the April numbers, and pardon my glasses, the lodging occupancy this April dropped to 9.2%, far surpassing any drop we've ever seen with any of our past challenges that we've had. April last year, it was 75%. The average daily rate dropped from $201 last April down to $94. Now, the good thing is, although the rate dropped, it was not as bad a drop as the occupancy. If you're able to keep that rate in a decent position, it does help position you for your recovery. So again, we're looking for those positive signs in these days of gloom. And our April tourist tax collections are expected to drop from 2.2 million. We're guessing it's going to be about $275,000 to $300,000. So a very dramatic drop in the month of April. So obviously Visit Sarasota had to make a lot of big changes. And right away in March, we changed all of our marketing. We shut down our traditional advertising campaigns. Sadly, we had to let go of our in-country representation in Germany and the UK, as well as our New York-based PR firm, all with the idea that we wanted to save as much money of the tourist development tax as we could, because we knew we would need it later on, either this year or next fiscal, for our recovery. We had to close our visitor centers, and we did have to lay off or not fill about a quarter of our positions. So we've gone from 20 FTEs down to 15 FTEs. We also began to do a lot online to support those efforts that started to happen really in the beginning of April. supporting those restaurants that were doing curbside to go, supporting our arts groups who were so creative with their online virtual performances, the virtual tours of our different attractions. So it was really shifting to a very different mode. The other thing we did was we partnered with our normal competitors down in Lee County, Fort Myers, Sanibel. We partnered with them on a research project so we could take different waves of listening to our consumers. How are they feeling? Are they even thinking about travel? And we've done 2 of those waves. We just completed one a couple of weeks ago. The good news is from the first wave to the second, you're already seeing some improvement in terms of visitors thinking about doing some trips. They'll be coming from a very close area. And it's about 50-50 split. But half of our likely consumers say they're really not thinking about traveling at all, at least until fall. But the good news is about half of them are thinking about traveling. And what is the kind of place they want to go to? They want places with beaches, with a lot of beautiful, big outdoor open spaces. And it's as though they're describing Southwest Florida and Sarasota County. So that's very good for us. They also obviously want to know about our safety and cleanliness precautions. And I was surprised by this. They want to know how the community has been helping those in crisis and those in need. And so the fact that our community rallied with the giving challenge for record-breaking contributions to all the charities in town, those are going to be very important stories to tell in the coming months as we recover. We are in a phased recovery, as is the state of Florida with Visit Florida. So again, right now, it's primarily just telling good stories, sharing good pictures, reminding people that we're still here without an overt tourism message or saying, come on down. We believe with the governor moving us into the second phase, the reopening of our vacation rentals will actually begin our marketing. We think probably next week or the week after. We're doing one more wave of consumer research just to be sure. And we're going to be very narrowly focused with a digital campaign based on behavior of our consumers, showing us that they're willing to travel. You know, one of the other things that visitors said is they'll feel confident about travel when they see Universal and Disney starting to open. So having those openings announced, even though they may not want to go there, that's important for their psyche and is a little sign of hope for them. So we expect that campaign to be kicking off in the next couple of weeks. And we'll be working with Visit Florida on their campaign because Visit Florida is helping to help. They're not giving us money, but they're buying down the cost of the advertising, which will help us even further stretch our dollars. Now, next year will be a challenge as we look at continuing and expanding the marketing, because we know that the tourist tax collections will have really crashed. Now, we did a budget based on $15 million in collections for next year. The county staff's a little more optimistic. They think we'll be able to hit 19 million. So we think we've built a very good campaign with that funding that will do that very slow built up recovery as we move into the end of this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And there are changes in all parts and segments. I just talked about the advertising. Sales is very important for those hotels that have meeting space. And there's an encouraging trend. While all of the meetings canceled, many of them have rebooked for next fall or early next year. Many organizations that typically had large conventions have decided to have much smaller gatherings. Well, that's just perfect for the kind of hotels we have here in Sarasota County. So those are very encouraging signs. We're continuing to get a lot of opportunities to book meetings and groups for later this calendar year and into next. And working with a lot of brides, rescheduling their weddings. I think every venue in the county that caters to weddings is jam-packed for the fall, as people have either rebooked their weddings or deciding to bring their weddings to a quieter part of the country. And then finally, we know how important sports is. We are so disappointed that we are not going to see the mayor make her Major League Baseball debut, which was supposed to be next week in Atlanta with the Braves, but hopefully we'll be able to reschedule that for next year. But with sports, again, we're working on rebooking a lot of the events that were supposed to be here. And interesting enough, we're actually getting inquiries from people who want to move events from other parts of the country that have been harder hit with the virus and possibly come to our area when the appropriate time comes that we can have those sporting events. So there's a lot of different moving parts with all of this. There are a lot of challenges, but you can tell, I know I gave you in the slide deck some idea of the storytelling we're doing. So things like telling the story of our beautiful Cool Today Park, or the different parks and amenities that you find in Northport. All of that's going to be very important in our recovery. And I do have to say, we just heard from our first journalist who wants to come for a visit to our community at the end of June. Visit Florida is bringing them to us, and they're from the Atlanta area. So I think it shows how our Braves connection is going to help us with all our recovery. So that is my very brief report, Mayor. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haley. I appreciate you coming and giving this presentation and making it as positive as it could possibly be, given the drastic reduction in visitors to our area, which means a drastic reduction in hotel stays and money coming in. So thank you for that. I don't know if anybody has any questions, and I also see that Commissioner Carasone has disappeared. I don't know. While we figure out what city attorney, can we continue with? I know we have a quorum, but if there's technical difficulties, does that constitute us having to stop?
The meeting has not been disabled at this time, and you do have a quorum.
Okay, so we're okay.
And just note on the record when the commissioner enters and exits the meeting.
And
Okay,
just-
yeah, I don't know where she may have gone or what may have happened. So,
Mayor,
yes,
just for notice, it is storming extremely bad down here with a lot of lightning. And if
Yeah.
she's in her store, then she's around my area. So
okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's storming pretty bad here. We just haven't had too much lightning this past half hour or so. So,
And Mayor, we may also want to ask the city clerk just to keep an eye out in case Commissioner Carasone has lost her video connection. She might telephone into the meeting as well.
okay, thank you. City Clerk, maybe if you could try and reach Commissioner Carasone or maybe City Manager. In the meantime, we'll go ahead. Vice Mayor, I see that you have some questions or comments.
No questions, just a huge thank you to Virginia. You can see her expertise, you can see her experience level and how she goes after things in order to accomplish it and for it to be successful. And I trust her immensely in the avenues that she goes, and I wish her the very best because tourism is a huge part of our county. And so I'm behind her all the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody else have any questions or comments. All right, so at this time, Ms. Haley, thank you again for your time. I do appreciate it. And hopefully you'll be down in Northport and showing off our pool and our Warm Mineral Springs as you reopen your advertising of the area, and look forward to seeing you.
Excellent.
very
And we'll
much.
be there for the ribbon cutting for the Hampton Inn.
Oh, good. Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haley.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so now at this time, we'll go ahead and move on to the MPO Long Range Transportation Plan. I know that Commissioner Carasone, I believe, is our representative on this board. So I don't know if she's part of the presentation or if it's just city manager. So at this time, I'll turn it over to city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of our departments, our Neighborhood Development Services and Public Works Department have worked to get this presentation on here. If the clerk can add Ms. Lee Holt from the Sarasota Manatee MPO into the panelist so that she can give the presentation. And the one thing I did want to point out too is this presentation, as is noted in the agenda item, is not going to be done in the 15-minute time frame. Requested that, and we added that to the agenda item as well so that it wouldn't be stated accidentally. And that way, when the 15 minutes is up, we didn't try to stop the presentation.
Thank
That,
you.
turn it over to Ms. Holt so that she can start her presentation.
Mayor, Commissioner
Yes.
Carasone is trying to connect, and IT is giving her a call to see if they can help her.
Thank you very much for that update, City Clerk. All right, go ahead, Ms. You might want to unmute because at this time I cannot hear you.
There we go.
There you go.
Here we go.
Thank
Hi,
you
how
so
are
much.
you? Thank you
Hello.
for having me. We really appreciate you taking the time to hear about the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. We recognize that in this time of crisis, it's hard to think 25 years in the future when it's hard to know what's going on in the next 25 minutes. So we appreciate the conversation. We provided you with a significant amount of material in advance so that we wouldn't have to take up too much time in the meeting. We are at a critical point in our planning process. We plan for a 25-year period. We update that plan every 5 years. And we are mandated by law to have a cost feasible plan. So we have projected our revenue for the next 25 years. And, you know, there's never enough money to do everything that everybody wants to do. And we have to accommodate all the cities and both counties and the airport and Port Manatee in our planning process. We're responsible for all modes of transportation, walking, bicycling, trails, roads, you know, boats, airplanes, every mode, every kind of user, all of that must be in our plan. So we're at that critical point where we take our big list of what everybody wants. We provided you with a list of a significant number of road segments that are eligible for our kind of funding, both state and federal. But we just wanted to do a quick check-in with you. It's been a year since we reviewed your comprehensive plan. We know, I'm going to review what we think we know about Northport. We know that you need a new hospital. We know that affordable housing is important. We know that development of Main Street options and activity centers is a priority for you. Job creation and industrial commercial development and underage alcohol abuse. Those were sort of the community issues that you outlined for us. Like many communities, you have aging stormwater infrastructure and roadway network. A lot of bridges, a lot of bridge issues. We have almost 500 bridges in the 2-county area, and many of them are many years old, and that's going to be beyond your borders. That's going to be a regional issue that we may need to address. Always funding for roads and transportation is an issue. The gas tax is fixed. We know there are local funds, but most of those local funds that even could be used to match state and federal funds are already committed to operations and maintenance or to bonding projects that you already have on the books. we're aware of that. And, you know, the gas tax is just not sufficient anymore. And it wasn't before today. And we're very aware that it's going to significantly impact what we do a year from now. And we know that many jurisdictions are already looking at how are they going to manage next year's budget with the revenue changes that we're going to face from today. We did add transit to every list. There seems to be a lot of discussion as we're out in the community. There's a need for transit. At the same time, transit is very expensive. But with unemployment approaching 20%, there will probably be a new demand for transit if that unemployment number doesn't drop quickly. There will be many people who have to rely on transit over the next year to 2 years as they get back to their normal. Also, you told us that east-west corridor development was important. We clearly have heard your desire for a new interchange in the Yorkshire Raintree area. We're having that conversation with FDOT on a regular basis. We will have it on our priority list. It is not on an FDOT priority list yet, but we clearly understand the need for that and all the reasons why it's important. The commercial industrial development, the ability to evacuate, you know, more evacuation opportunities, north-south connectivity to the east of I-75. That interchange is very important, and we're aware of that. And then we also had continued US 41 widening westward from Tuscola Boulevard was on your list. And then local roads, widening of Hillsborough, Price Boulevard widening, and then connectivity between neighborhoods over drainage canals. Emergency preparedness, extending Toledo Blade, extending Raintree Boulevard, and extending Price to connect with River Road. More park and ride facilities, developing a multimodal master plan, and integrating city trails with the legacy trail. So we think that is what we've heard over the past year as we've worked on the plan. We're getting ready to start putting dollars next to some of these things. So we want to just check in and make sure we've got the list right. We want to know if we've missed anything. We want to know if any of your priorities have changed, that or if new things have been added. I apologize. So we would love to hear from you. We just want to make sure we've got it right, that we're going in the right direction. And, you know, we have a long list and we have a small purse. So, you know, what's at the top of your list today?
Is that your presentation, ma'am?
That's it.
Well, geez, you didn't need any additional time for your presentation.
Well, it's important that we hear from you.
Oh, excellent. City manager, did staff want to make a presentation at all? I know that there was a PowerPoint in the backup. Did they want to discuss anything?
Well, I'll let Ms. Belia decide if she wants to give a presentation. I think the primary thing was just to be here in case you had any questions, though. So yeah, they don't have a presentation to make, but if you have questions, we're here and available.
Fantastic. So I know that we gave our priority list back in October of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not too sure if you're looking for something else, city manager.
No, I'm not looking for anything else. I think the MPO is looking to see if that's still, if you've had any changes, just making sure they don't miss any updates you might want.
All right. The only thing that I do not see on this list that we did give as a fourth priority back in October was the emergency evacuation study for this general area. I don't see that on your long-range list that was provided.
Okay. Studies show up on a different list, but I appreciate you bringing it back to our attention, because we do need to have that in another place. So thank you.
Yeah, because everybody, in order to get, from the coastal areas to I-75 for evacuation, pretty much go through us or River Road or Veterans Highway, east-west corridors. And I think that's why we thought it was important to do some kind of an emergency evacuation study. So I just wanted to see, I didn't realize there was a separate list. So thank you for that. All right. So Vice Mayor, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Lee. Appreciate it. It's always a pleasure seeing you again. In the backup material, there was a transform tomorrow, and it was the list, pretty much what you read off. And the very first one was talking about what I'm interpreting as the interchange. And it just named Yorkshire. And I know we went through a lot during that meeting that Mayor was talking about, making sure that it was Yorkshire / Raintree.
Okay.
So it took me back a little bit just seeing that it said Yorkshire. I mean, you guys have updated that to be the Raintree, actually Raintree / Yorkshire.
Okay.
Is that?
We'll be careful about that.
Oh, okay, because, we were told some things through staff that sounded really good. It had a great potential for us. So that brings the next question up. On that list, is there a connectability to Charlotte County, maybe on Hillsborough or Price or something that would make a connectability going from Northport over to that county?
That might be a staff question. I have widening of Hillsborough Boulevard to 4 lanes with connections to Veterans Boulevard.
Correct. That's Charlotte County. So,
okay.
All right. And which one is that?
I don't see that.
That would not.
It's not really on this list.
The roads in Charlotte County are not necessarily named on this list, but I have a sheet with a little more detail, and it does say to Veterans Boulevard.
All right, so it's within that widening of Hillsborough that you mentioned. That's great. The connectivity, because of that interchange, is vital. I mean, you named so many things of why it's important, not just to one county, but to more than one county. It's very important, that connectability. So, and I believe that connectability is a definite achievement that you guys want to deliver.
And when we do plan with Charlotte County, that's part of the process.
Right. Yeah, everything has to be done regionally, when you're thinking of things. Money. How do we get more money? I know with this COVA thing that the president has talked about, that infrastructure needs to be boosted. And if he were going to supply any more money, he would want it to go to infrastructure. Are you guys lobbying for something like that to occur?
We're not allowed to lobby, but we do educate.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we would absolutely support that. We have talked with your staff and with all of our partners about making sure that we have things that are shovel ready in case there is infrastructure money that comes available in a future bill in the near term. We do have a long list of safety projects that are ready to go, and we have we suggested to staff that we can help with those. But anything that you've got, and shovel ready means that you don't have any right-of-way issues. The right-of-way is there and available, and that you have design in the works. So anything at that stage would be considered shovel ready. And so, yes, now is the time to get those things ready to go at the local level. And we are happy to help you in any way that we can to move those along. We have updated our lists. We've had some jurisdictions come and say, we have this, so that if somebody calls us and says, is this on one of your priorities lists? We can say, yes, it is, which is one of the check boxes for federal money. So I believe we have a good list for you ready to go.
All right, great. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hanks?
Yeah, I think maybe we should get the bring back to the board this talk about Raintree and Yorkshire, because one of the last meetings we had, it was discussed. That there's a different direction that really needs to take place, because it was discussed that would affect our zoning, our comp plan, upzoning, things like that. And I know that initially when we did this, there was a good idea towards it, but since then, there has been a lot of information come back. And I will tell you, in my talks with with the state representatives and county commissioners, Yorkshire is predominantly upon their mind, and I would love to keep it as Yorkshire, because I think that will better benefit our entire region. I don't think it's going to take away from the Port Charlotte area, but it would take away from our area if it moves any more, just because of the way our zoning is. So I think that's something we should have brought back to the commission if we need to come back together on that, and just make sure that we're solidified in our discussions. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanks, I thought the reason that we left it as Raintree is the first one, based on discussion with staff and the ability to make that connection seamlessly with Charlotte County and the city of Northport to I-75, to be able to capture more dollars because it has a greater impact in regionally. That's why we had it Raintree / Yorkshire.
Right, I understand that, but it did. But in the information that we have received since then, it seems to me that it's going to really, it's really going to hinder the way our city is structured. It's going to create some real issues. And I don't see per se, you may be talking about the money wise, but I don't know per se whether or not that's going to have as much direct effect on our marketability of our industry whenever we are trying to grow that like industrial, especially coming out of a situation like this, to be able to make those promises.
Right. Well,
Mayor,
I heard something.
that was Julie. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Miss Julie.
Yes, for the record, Julianne Abelia, Public Works Director. We work very closely with DOT on this issue, and quite honestly, it has gone back and forth. It's not completely decided, and they are still, of course, looking at both Raintree and Yorkshire. That's why we wanted to keep both of them on the table. Originally, it started out that we definitely wanted to go with Yorkshire. We have the activity center all planned for out there. It would be a direct access to I-75. We've even in the past had some developers for commercial industrial development looking at that location. Unfortunately, the way DOT views it is they want to see regional connectivity, and that is why they were at one point leaning toward Raintree. And that's because you have a direct access and you can provide connectivity to more of a regional area, being Englewood. However, since that time and since the commission took the action, it's gone back and forth. The other thing I'd like to mention is there has been for quite some time a big push from Charlotte County to, of course, have Raintree. So it's just one of those type situations. It's probably best. Staff would recommend that we keep it as recommended by the commission the second time around, to include both of them. That keeps our options open, because in the end, DOT is going to have they're going to be the deciding factor with all the studies that they're going to perform and everything else. So it just keeps our options open, because as much as we want what's best for the city, the state is gonna be the prevailing agency to make the decision.
Thank you, Ms. Julie. City Manager?
Yeah.
And Mayor, one of the things that there's been, as Julie said, and as everybody said, there's been a lot of things that have changed since you all last had this conversation. One of the things we've become aware of in some of our planning activities, and as you know, we're also looking at doing a master plan for Activity Center 6. We were about to hire a consultant, and then that fell through. So we're still working towards that, and how much we can do in-house versus if we need to hire a consultant at this point. But one of the things that we have recently learned is the majority of the property out there now is owned by one person. And that developer has also said that he is supportive of just about any type of development and what we may need in order to make something like this happen. So the world has definitely changed since you all last had the conversation on that interchange, specifically, like I said, ownership of property and desire to do things out there. So I don't disagree when Commissioner Hanks made the statement that maybe you all do need to readdress this. Whether we change it to just Yorkshire or leave it as both items, I think that it would be appropriate for you all to have us put together a presentation, give you some updated information, because October, while not that long ago, a lot has changed since then, and we've just become aware of some of it. So I don't think it's a bad idea if nothing else, just to have the conversation on an agenda item coming up.
City Manager, would you be able to put that on there if the board is willing, so that we can at least look at more of this information?
Yes, and that's what I said. I mean, if you all want the agenda item, I'll have one put together. Obviously, it won't be today, but we can start working on something and gather you as much information, and we can also share it with the MPO so they have the information as well.
Mayor, may we get a consensus on that, just to look at some of the updated information?
Yeah, I have no problem. Can I ask a question before we go to consensus though first?
Sure.
City Manager, do you have an idea when you could get this together? Because if it has changed so much since October till now, how long until we get an agenda item? And then what's to say that it's not going to change again, as things progress?
Well, one thing I can tell you are there are no guarantees that anything won't change again.
Right.
It changed once, it can certainly change again, and anybody can buy and sell property anytime they want. You know me well enough to know I would never promise that things won't change. It's pretty much the one constant in life. That being said, I think that, within the next, probably, what are we in, June now? We can try and get it for you by the end of July. It's always a push, and you don't meet in August, so it would either be by the end of July or first thing in September. If we don't meet in August, we can't do it then.
All right, so let's get a consensus to have City Manager create an agenda item to discuss the 75 interchange at Raintree / Yorkshire, whichever one you want to put first at this point, so that we can have a bigger discussion on that item. Mayor?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks?
Yes, and Mayor, I'd like to say something too that I wasn't quite done.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I'm not saying we need to take Raintree off the table. I just want to make sure that we're not putting our focus on Raintree in light of some of the information. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes.
And I do see that Commissioner Carasone is back. I saw her come on at about 1:40. Are you able to hear us, Commissioner Carasone?
Yes. I can hear you.
Well, we can hear you, but we cannot understand you.
Sounds like Morse code.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. I don't think it's Morse code either. I assume that was, I don't know what that was. We have our consensus. So City Manager, if you could go ahead and get that on an agenda item as soon as possible, preferably not the last meeting in July, because that one's Because that one's already jam-packed. So hopefully sometime in July
Or September.
or
Sorry,
September.
we'll get it done as soon as we can. And
All
I
right.
agree that the last meeting in July is usually a disaster, which is why we did move it to a day meeting this time, though. Or,
Yeah,
technically
I
a
saw
morning.
that. All right. Commissioner, sorry, Vice Mayor Luke, I see that you have your hand up. Is there anything else you'd like to weigh in on the MPO?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I totally agree with the discussion, but I am not somebody who is afraid of rezoning. I mean, zoning changes all the time. And so it's something I think we need to look at what Julie was talking about, where DOT desires things, you know, how they'll work more with us, and we go with that. And if we have to change zoning or whatever, then we do it. To me, there's always a way to get it done, but getting the interchange to that area to me is the most important. So thank you.
All right. And I do see that Commissioner Carasone left again. So she's really having some technical issues here. So it's 1:47 for City Clerk on that. Seeing nothing else on this item, do you have anything you'd like to add, Ms. Lee? Do you want to unmute, please?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation. It really helps us as we move into this next phase. We will be very cognizant of what your goals are for that area and getting the words right and making sure that whatever we put in the long range plan can support whatever direction you decide to go. We will be very cognizant of that. So this was a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. And Mr. David, thank you also for joining us. Do appreciate it. And look forward to many more conversations in the future. I do appreciate the collaboration. So.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the effort your staff puts into working with the MPO and your two commissioners who serve on the MPO board, Commissioner Emmerich and Commissioner Carasone. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor, did you want?
Yeah, just thank you so much for MPO or to MPO. They work excellently with us, and I appreciate all the information they feed to us, and they're outstanding. So thank you very much, not just for today, but every day with what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. City Clerk or City Manager, does anybody know if Vice Mayor's technical difficulties can be resolved if we took like maybe a 5 or 10 minute break?
You mean Commissioner Carasone's?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Carasone.
Yeah, Riley said that her Wi-Fi's out, and so she was trying to connect through phone. So he thinks that she just has really not so good service out there with her phone.
And again, Mayor, the weather's horrible over here, and I wouldn't doubt if it's not going in and out.
All right. Well, we'll just plug along, and hopefully she'll be able to participate as she's able. So we'll move on to the neighborhood revitalization discussion. City Manager, I know this has been one that we have tried many times in the past, and it looks like it'll finally come to fruition to have this conversation. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll see how this goes. As far as coming to fruition, we've had multiple conversations on this item. And I will tell you, this has been one of those items that I have delayed now for a little bit, simply because I was hoping that we could do this in a live format, because I thought that might be better. But there's been some other things that have happened that have kind of necessitated this happening sooner rather than later. So that's why it's on today's meeting. One of the things we'd really like to get some final decision on is like the neighborhood signs. I know we've had some conversations on it. We have some information to present to you. Sorry, if the clerk could add Nicole Galehouse to the meeting, because she's going to do a presentation here in just a second. I meant to ask that while I was speaking. So there she is. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ms. Galehouse. She can give you her presentation and we can walk through the revitalization program.
Thank you.
Hello, for the record, Nicole Galehouse, Planning Division Manager. So we're here today to, rediscuss the neighborhood revitalization plan. We've reached out to all the different departments, found out some more specifics on what they are doing. And so that's provided in the implementation strategy update document that is attached to this item. As you can see from the timetable, most things are current or ongoing. I would say even some of the things that that are listed under 6 to 12 months since this was drafted have actually started to be implemented as well. I was given an update this morning, for example, that the door-to-door neighborhood watch signage is being worked on by Public Works and police. So we're definitely moving forward with most of these items. So the detailed report has been provided to you. And we'd like to get any, feedback and update on anything else you'd like us to move forward with sooner. And then also the signage, Public Works has provided some examples of different types of neighborhood signs. They're getting ready to start development of these. And they have a few different examples depending on the type of neighborhood. Obviously, some neighborhoods we want to keep the monument style sign that has been there. We want to replace it. In some neighborhoods, given the orientation of them and the size and the many different entrances, it can be difficult to put a monument sign to these neighborhoods. And so one of the examples that they've given are the sign toppers or the street nameplate that has the neighborhood in there. And that's something that we really like both from Public Works and from planning, because it would be much easier to implement citywide with all the different neighborhoods we have, especially from a cost perspective. You're going to be able to manage this much easier. So Public Works is looking for direction to move forward with signage as well.
Can you put examples of the signage that you're talking about up on a shared screen?
I can. Give me
that way then everybody can see it.
1 second, hold on. Okay, so these are the street nameplates with the neighborhood sign examples and the sign toppers. And then they have two different examples for ground signs within the neighborhoods.
So your staff is suggesting the first ones that go on top of the street signs?
For implementation for most neighborhoods, and it would depend potentially on how the neighborhood is set up. Some neighborhoods you have a clear, like, okay, this is where you enter the neighborhood, and it's easy to put a ground sign to mark that. But other neighborhoods have quite a few different entrances coming from different ways, and there's not a clear delineator. So the sign toppers are a way to provide that neighborhood identification throughout the neighborhoods to really help people, identify with that a little better. And Public Works, I think, can speak to this more as well if needed.
City Manager, did Public Works want to weigh in?
They're certainly available to do that. If we can have Ms. Belia make sure she's in the speaker area.
Since we have a shared screen, I can't see if anybody has their hand up. So if a commissioner would like to speak, could you just go ahead and just say your name and.
This is Vice Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'm in agreement with what staff is saying. I thought about that myself. There's more than one way in. It'd be difficult to choose which way in the monument sign would go. But with those toppers, every street is identified as being part of, of that community. And to me, it's more of a community feeling if it's on each of the street signs. I'm not saying not to do a monument for those that have that single entrance going in or replacing the ones that are already there. But I love the topper ideas so that each street of the community is identified as part of that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Emmerich or Commissioner Hanks, did you want to weigh in on any of this?
Yes, I did, Commissioner Emmerich.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this has been a long-going process. I appreciate everything that staff has done. I do agree to an extent with Commissioner Luke with the community with the sign toppers in there. The way that it looks is like if there was a monument sign there, I would say that that needs to be replaced, but then you would not need the sign toppers when you have the monument sign. I would use the sign toppers like in the smaller neighborhoods, and then this way everybody throughout the community could have their identification purposes, you know. And then you had the other sign that was on the 2 poles that would possibly be for an even middle-sized type community. And I'm just going to use Marius Park as an example because there's a sign there that says Marius Park. Well, that would be appropriate sizing for that area. Now at Highland Ridge, Country Club Ridge, you're talking Jockey Club, they have the monument signs. So in my opinion, we replace those with the monument signs, which is the bottom picture, because they were there. Some of them have deteriorated to the point of no repair. And I think that's what that community has already been accustomed to. That's just my opinion, and that's what I'm going to stand on. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Emmerich. Commissioner Hanks, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, Mayor. I too also think being flexible is probably the way to look at this, look at each individual community differently. So I would agree with what the Vice Mayor said. Also agree with what Commissioner Emmerich said. I think being flexible and then looking through these, I know using those toppers, you know, going throughout the community, I agree with Vice Mayor. You know, it will have that feel when you're driving through the neighborhood. The cost of it is exponentially less. That being said, also, you know, where there are, as Commissioner Emmerich said, where there are the larger communities and you have the big monument signs, where you have those single entrances, you know, I think it flows better with those communities. And again, I wouldn't worry, as Commissioner Emmerich said, with the street signs on the inside of that, because when you're going in, you have the big appearance, you know, you have the big foyer walking into it. Those littler ones, you know, I think having those street signs in there will pull the whole community together. So I agree with kind of both of them. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, if there's one way into a community similar to like Country Club Ridge, obviously a monument sign instead of putting a little topper sign would be the way to go, because there's one way in, basically one way out. My concern with these topper signs is if you look at like Yale Street and then you see Green Corridor, I would hate to have somebody, we have such a transient community. We have so many visitors to our community. I would never, ever want someone to think when they have to call 911 to report an accident or to report something that happened, to give the community name, because they don't realize that's a community name and not the street name. Seconds matter in emergencies. And if you have Fairmount and Jefferson Streets, it can create confusion to 911 operators in an emergency. And that concerns me deeply with these toppers. We had the exact same problems with other streets. That's why we don't have the dual names anymore, even if they're for recognition of an individual. That's why we did away with it. So I am concerned with the safety aspect of having 2 names on a street sign. And I don't know if that can be resolved. I understand that the cost is very small, but when you multiply it by every single street and every single street sign, that can become very, very expensive. And I could never approve spending that kind of money for a topper or these monument signs. If they need to be replaced because they're old and outdated, absolutely. We're one city, and I know that there's neighborhoods and everybody takes pride in their neighborhoods, but I just can't wrap my head around identifying a neighborhood in this kind of fashion. I think I'll say it, it's wasteful spending. Everybody knows where they live. And if you're going to put toppers on to say, hey, you're in this neighborhood, we got to make sure that it's safe for the transient people that come in here for emergencies. So this is not something, and I think I've been saying it all along, I'm not in favor of this.
Yeah, Mayor, if you don't mind, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, the reason that we're looking at this, the reason why we separated our neighborhoods the way we did and we have the activity centers the way we do was to bring community among one of the largest cities within the state. Our landmass is so large, and we don't have any per se downtown. We don't have any per se Northport-esque town center. And that was kind of the purpose between these, was we would have 26 little town centers that resonated with each one. So if I wanted to meet you over at the Ale House over on Yale Street end of the Green Corridor, that's where we would go, and it'd bring a sense of that feel of the neighborhood. I personally do not believe, if you look at the topper the way it is, I don't think that that's going to be, especially if you look at the one that is contrasting sign, I don't know that that's going to be an issue for our 911. I would also say with an average cost of $100, though, you and I look at that and we're saying, God, $100, I wouldn't put that on my mailbox, but these are going rates, if we're going to do it. And you mentioned, the replacement of it. If you have a neighborhood with 600 homes in 10 streets, you're talking about $1,000 compared to a $7,000 sign or a $5,000 sign. It would take you, if you look at the years of replacement, if you had to replace it every 5 years, it would take 30 years to match that monument sign. So I think the cost effectiveness to bring that community heart together, I don't believe that to me, that the toppers is absolutely not frivolous spending. If what you're trying to do is bring communities together as part of our strategic planning and part of what Northport's been trying to do for 50 years. That's just my thought.
And Mayor, may I speak again?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
This one question for staff. How many neighborhoods do we have identified as of right now?
I think it's 26 or 27.
71.
I was gonna say, I think it's like in the 70s, but this is where we are in the process of currently reevaluating what those neighborhoods are. And I don't know what the number will come out to when we're all said and done, but that's where we talked about, really having that neighborhood focus that Commissioner Hanks talked about and really trying to bring people together. So we are in the process of looking at those neighborhoods and making them a little more logical than they currently are.
26, that's what you'll come to, 26, because that's what I use. I'm just kidding.
26, that's my goal, got it.
Okay, so here's just a question to add on to that. When you have the sign toppers, and let's say you have a smaller neighborhood community, and then you are going to go with the sign toppers as like a halfway point or even like a compromise, maybe just looking at the neighborhood and their major intersections within that neighborhood, that's what would get the sign topper instead of every single road sign. And that may, cut down the feasibility of, you're still building the community, but you're not, designating every single street sign out there. You might have 100 street signs within one neighborhood community with different roads. I have no clue. But I'm just saying, as a compromise, major intersections within that community might be an option. Thank you. That's all I had.
I would venture to say the average community.
Commissioner Hanks, hang on 1 second. Vice Mayor would like to speak.
I was going to state the same thing that Commissioner Emmerich did, that it can be a compromise of putting those toppers on. I mean, if it's a large enough area and there's so many tiny side streets, you can compromise and make it the major intersection so that everybody sees that topper, feels that community pride as they're going in and out of their neighborhood. And it gives that identity. I've had people tell me, I don't even know the neighborhood that I live in. I would love to know where my neighborhood's at and what defines it. And I actually see those toppers that tell you the neighborhood as being beneficial for 911. If they can state, you know, that this is Fairmont or this is Green Corridor, they know exactly what neighborhood they're talking about, and then they tell them the intersection. So I don't see it as, you know, a thing to harm. It's more information, and to me, more information is helpful and beneficial. But I've worked those types of jobs before, and I know technology, it's not going to bring up that intersection with a false name. They're going to ask for more information. So, but as I say, I see it as a positive, not as a negative. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanks, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, ma'am, I'm sorry. I was going to say also, as Commissioner Luke said, I've had folks that have asked me to, I don't know what, or not asked me, but just in conversation have not known what neighborhood they were in and kind of mentioned that. But that being said, I would surmise the average neighborhood doesn't have even remotely close to 100 streets. I would have surmised the average neighborhood is probably closer to 10 to 15 streets. And I'm sure somebody can get a number on that. I'm sure there's some that have 20 or 30. But I would surmise that the average streets within a neighborhood are going to be relatively low. And if you're looking at an average of 10 streets, of course, you can look at what that cost is of $1,000 compared to one of the signs or something like that, having to replace them every 5 years or whatever you have to do. I just think the costs, if what you're trying to do, and I think we have to ask ourselves first, are we wanting to bring community cohesiveness together among these communities? If that's what we're trying to do, I believe this is one of the conservative approaches to do that. If we don't care about any of that, then you're absolutely right. It is frivolous spending. It just depends on what we're trying to do here. And I know for 50 something years, this is part of what we've been trying to do. So if we're going to continue to try to do this, I think this is a phenomenal idea and way to do it. We can mix and match, as we mentioned before. We can be flexible. Some of those with the single entrances, as you said, can have the big monument signs. You don't need these because you know whenever you're going in. Maybe one of the smaller ones could have the banner sign there that had with the poles. But I think these for these communities that it's a little more difficult to do, kind of like a jockey club that has so many streets in it. I think this is the cost-effective and a conservative way to do it.
And remember that this came from a study that we did in 2017, I believe, for the 5 older districts. This is where it stemmed from. So this is just the start of something. This is only the beginning. What we set is, can be followed. So I'm not taking away from the value of it, but this is the first step into something. We're not talking about going out and blanketing the entire city right now. We're talking about those 5 areas and how we want to see this growth and this pattern go throughout the city.
Okay, now hang on one second, Ms. Nicole. Well, if we're only talking about 5 areas and we're 105 square miles, I have to then say, well, if you're going to concentrate on 5 areas, why are you not planning to concentrate on the rest of the city? I don't understand that. If you want to create an identity in an area, and I hate to tell you this, folks, I've lived here 30 years. I know exactly what area of Northport I lived in, every single place that I've lived. I know exactly where a lot of these places are. I don't know them by the neighborhood name, and I never will know them by the neighborhood name, regardless if we have a topper or a sign there. Because I go by the streets. I know where the cross streets are. I go by streets. I go by landmarks. I don't go by a topper on top of a street sign or a landmark monument sign. And I've never, in the 30 years of living here and 3 years of being a commissioner, had anybody ever come to me and say, I don't know what neighborhood I live in, and I wish I had an identity of what neighborhood I live in. I've never heard that until these past few commission meetings of neighborhood revitalization. That's where the subject comes up. Nowhere else outside of those meetings have I heard this even being discussed by the citizens. So,
and Mayor, just one more time, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I agree with you that conversation doesn't come up. I will tell you, when I first moved to Northport, I lived in the Jockey Club, and just as I mentioned it here now is exactly the way I would describe it. When somebody said, "Where do you live?" I'd say, "Well, I live in the Jockey Club," and then we defined down because that was my neighborhood. I will say that no, nobody has ever just come up to me and said, "Hey, where do I live?" and all this. It typically is within a conversation that you have, that it just kind of is a passing part of the conversation. So I just wanted to make clear that, it's nothing where somebody says, "Oh my gosh, what neighborhood do I live in?" because that doesn't happen. But I do believe that people who do know their neighborhoods do associate with it. I have heard Commissioner Emmerich say Highland Ridge. Whenever he speaks, I live in the Highland Ridge area. I've lived in the Jockey Club area. So it is something that whenever you live in an area, you do identify with when it is a neighborhood like that. And anywhere I've ever lived, I have identified with a neighborhood if I live within those neighborhoods.
And Commissioner Hanks, I agree with you 100%. 100%, because the Jockey Club is an established neighborhood that has been known as the Jockey Club forever. Just like the Estates has been known as the Estates forever. I live at Cranberry and Price. I don't have a neighborhood. It's called Cranberry and Price to everybody. When they say, where in Northport do you live? I live at Cranberry and Price area. Okay.
Let's get you a neighborhood name.
Huh?
Let's get you a neighborhood name when you take.
I don't need a neighborhood.
I'm just teasing you.
Just like you, Commissioner Hanks. I mean, you don't live in a neighborhood like that either. You live at a cross street general area.
My neighborhood is District 2 now. It's easier for me to say that. Oh, I live over in District 2 on the other side of Toledo Blade.
So these are the points I'm trying to get across. And now that I'm understanding that this is going to be only for 5 distinct neighborhoods that have already been established, like the Highland Ridge area, I don't know. Nicole, you had your hand up, and I'll go ahead and we'll then do another round with the commissioners after you speak.
Of course. So thank you. I just wanted to, you kind of brought up the point about being for 5 neighborhoods. So we talked about this, and this came up with the revitalization plan as a way for these neighborhoods to gain pride in their neighborhoods. A lot of the residents we heard from were very proud of their neighborhoods, but were disappointed that they didn't have that knowledge more widely known within their communities. And so we talked about using this as kind of a starting point for the whole city. We start here, see how it goes, and we can kind of use some of the lessons learned as we look to expand over the rest of the city. One of the things I also wanted to say is, as we revamp our neighborhoods and reevaluate where their boundaries should be, we can come back with some of those questions that you've been asking about how many streets are within it, how many street signs would we be talking about, how many entrance points. It may be that you want to put a topper at each entrance point to a neighborhood, or if there is only one, then you want the monument sign. And we can put a sign plan together with the new neighborhood maps as we create them to really refine and develop that plan. And so the conversation today is really to decide what standard we want to set as we move forward with that conversation. And the other thing I want to say is the neighborhoods, you're right. A lot of the city, we don't know our neighborhoods. I don't know what neighborhood I live in. I should, because I have a map on my computer, but I don't really look at it or refer to it often, but I would love to. I think that's really something that builds a community up And I think that's a conversation that the board should have about, you know, we know those neighborhoods of Highland Ridge and Country Club Ridge because they were established early on. We're still early on in terms of overall development for the city. So if we establish those now and really help build what those are now, then in 50 or 100 years, people are going to know them just like we know Country Club Ridge. So I just think that's important to take into consideration that we are still only about a third built out. So there's a lot of room to grow.
Excellently stated. Thank you, Nicole.
Anybody else would like to speak to this?
Oh, absolutely, Mayor. I got a few things to say.
Go ahead. I assume that's Commissioner Emmerich, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, let me explain to you about my community, which is Highland Ridge, and the community people within Highland Ridge. 5 years ago, the city maintained that sign out there with the landscaping and everything. They walked away from it. They didn't mow it. They didn't do anything for that sign. They just walked away. Now, I have people within this community that took it upon themselves, went up there, they mowed the grass, they planted plants, they kept that sign up as best as they could, and asked the city, please, would you please come back and take care of this sign? No. Well, guess what? We're at that point right now that these people need to be paid back with the recognition for their neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that they live in. This is a neighborhood that they take pride in. This is a neighborhood that the city installed many, many years ago and named it Highland Ridge. Well, guess what? It needs to keep going forward, just like Country Club Ridge, just like the Jockey Club. This is part of Northport's history, and this is the way it needs to stand because this community stands within this community, and that's what they deserve. That's all I got.
Anybody else?
Yes, Mayor, really quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would not mind at all. And I would ask that if moving forward, if what we're talking about is getting information, and I know initially it was the 5, but I'm like you. I don't see a point in just looking at 5. Let's look at, you know, whatever our neighborhood communities are going to look like. That's 26 or 187. I don't know. But let's take a look and then see what it is. I'm thinking it's probably going to be closer down to the size that I'm saying. But moving forward, if what we're doing is moving forward with information, possibly with a flexibility of the plans like we mentioned. You know, whether it is a plan of a smaller community that has every one of the streets, maybe there's 10 streets that have toppers on it, or a plan where it just has the 2 with one of those small little signs out front. You know, maybe if each community can have 1 or 2, 3 different ideas with some cost to that, then that would give us kind of a picture and an idea that we can work off of and maybe combine or pull away from. I think if that's what we're going to do, and I never have an issue with getting information, that might be the way to do it, to give us an idea of costs of the different ideas that we've come up with.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor?
If I remember correctly, and Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, we had discussions, well, we've had several discussions on this topic, but didn't we say we were going to start with these 5 and then the next year or next 2 years or whatever, we go to another 5 and then another 5? And not that it's the whole city, but we had a progression strategy of how to do this throughout the city in increments so that it wasn't this big amount or anything. Am I remembering correctly?
I do remember discussions along that line, yes.
Okay, and that's the way I see it. I agree with Commissioner Emmerich. I mean, this has been going on since 2017. We said we were going to do it. We even put the money, if I remember right, for 3. We said 3 to start with and then went with the full 5. And then we said we would just progress from there on out. So I think we need to quit kicking the can down the road, make this decision. I like what has been presented for the standard of having those toppers, the medium sign for a medium neighborhood, and then the monument sign to replace the ones that, you know, had monuments or have a one way in, one way out. I think we've talked about a standard that it compromises it all. And I think we all can be happy, achieving this. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree that Commissioner Emmerich with his thoughts about having these monument signs be maintained and taken care of and making it so that they look pretty and have pride. Those monument signs have been here practically 50, 60 years. So of course we need to make sure that those are taken care of and have that, because those are the older neighborhoods. My question is, what about the established neighborhoods that are privately taken care of, like Heron Creek? Are we putting in the sign? Is that Heron Creek's responsibility? Are they going to be all the same? Where does that kind of Talon Bay and Heron Creek and Bobcat Trail? Those are neighborhoods that have been established and you know where they are. Are we, the city, taking over those signs?
I would not say so. No, the homeowners associations maintain those signs, and those are part of their branding for their communities.
Right.
They put that as part of their own marketing and how they define their own community. But so I would not say that would be us taking those over now.
Mayor, may I speak?
Go ahead, please, Miss Julie.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Emmerich raises a very good point, and I would like to point out that when the plan was originally put together, there was 74 monument signs identified throughout the city. 71 of those are private, 3 of those are public. Probably 2 years ago or so, the one on Country Club Ridge was hit. That's in the public right-of-way area. We went after the insurance company of the driver, and we successfully acquired all the money to have it rebuilt. So that's already been rebuilt, one of the 3. Ridge is on this list, and it is a monument sign, and we would just love to be able to replace that monument sign. Commissioner Emmerich is right. I've gotten a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails about that. And we have not, and that sign has been let go. So we would love to get in there. A lot of the residents have asked me if they could help and make it a community event to put, if we get the plants for them, they're glad to plant them. So, and then really we only have one other public sign, and that's the Jockey Club sign. It's not on this list of 5, but maybe what we could do is, as Nicole says, we could work together and come back with a plan for the commission and kind of finite what's public, what's private, and then make some recommendations as far as access points and whether we would recommend a topper sign or we would want the a monument or even the other alternative, the dual post sign. So if we could at least today get commission's approval for that Highland Ridge, one of the 5, and then we could come back to the commission with the other 4, some recommendations, and move on from there, I would appreciate it.
But Miss Julie, I thought we've already given the approval for budgetary to go ahead and replace the signs at Highland Ridge. Country Club was already taken care of because of
yes,
that.
ma'am.
But I thought that approval was already given for Highland Ridge.
I believe the commission voted it. If it was a monument sign, they could put the monument sign back. So of the 5 that's on the agenda today or is in this plan, the other 4 locations are not monuments and they currently don't have any signage. So I'm recommending that. And what we wanted to do today also was to get the commission's direction as to what types of signs would correspond with what types of neighborhoods. So I believe it's been established, you're correct, that if they had a monument sign, such as Highland Ridge, we would put a monument sign back. So since the other 4 neighborhoods before you today don't have a specific type of signage, I think we could go back, Nicole and my department, and come up with some recommendations and show the commission access points and so forth, and come back with official recommendations for those 4 neighborhoods. But at least today we'd move forward with Highland Ridge.
Is it possible, Miss Julie, to replace the Highland Ridge sign with something very similar to what the Highland Ridge sign currently looks like?
Yes, ma'am. I would definitely replace it with the monument sign as to what they had before. Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
Okay, but when I hear monument sign and when I hear Highland Ridge sign, there's two different kind of pictures being painted. I would like to have a monument sign, but ensure that it looks similar to what is the existing monument sign, not something new and updated.
No, well, what it's gonna look like is it would look very similar to what we, because that sign is probably, I'm gonna guess, probably close to 40 years old, okay? The Highland Ridge, 30 at best. So it would look very similar. It's a little bit more modern looking, but it's very similar to the Country Club Ridge sign, because the Country Club Ridge sign was very similar to the current Highland Ridge sign. So it would just be a little bit more modern looking, but it's going to resemble the Country Club Ridge monument sign because it's been updated a bit. That's just how it is, when you buy those. So those two would be kind of like the standard, if you will, for any monument signs we'd be putting up. We try to make them the same. You know what I mean? So that would be my recommendation.
And I tend to agree with the similarity of the monument signs, but if each neighborhood has its own unique identity, and that sign that currently is at Highland Ridge is a unique identifier, and it looks nothing like what that Country Club Ridge sign looks like. My question is, can we make the Highland Ridge sign look like a monument sign, but similar to the way that it looks now, just replacing it with something new?
Personally, myself, Mayor, I don't want it replaced looking like it does. It's dilapidated. It's wood, if I remember right. And I like the consistency of this modern look. And to me, they deserve a modern look instead of the dilapidated wooden kind.
And I agree with the Vice Mayor.
And I agree with the Vice Mayor. We need to stay consistent within the city.
Well, as long as Commissioner Emmerich, and I know this has been one of your bones of contention, come on the board, and way before then even, if you feel that having a sign that's similar at Country Club Ridge, sign similar to that at Highland Ridge, who am I to disagree then? I just was looking for the identity of what that sign, yes, it's dilapidated, and I'm not saying to replace it with a dilapidated sign. That's not what I was saying. I was saying to upgrade it, but to have it look as unique as what it does now, because the sign doesn't look anything like Country Club, even when it was back in its heyday. That's all I was getting. So
and I understand that and I appreciate that, but if we're going to move forward with this project throughout the city, I would like to stay consistent within the city and have them all pretty much coordinated the same. I think that would be fair to the whole community instead of having different signs in different areas. It's just my opinion.
So, Miss Julie, you need consensus to replace the Highland Ridge sign with something similar to the Country Club Ridge sign.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Can we get a consensus for that, Commissioner Emmerich?
I am a yes.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks?
Yes, ma'am.
And just because I can't see all the participants, I just want to call out Commissioner Carasone's name in case she has joined us. Hearing
Mayor,
none.
she's still having technical difficulties. I believe it's because the storm and that Verizon may be completely down in her area. She was going to try and get in a few minutes.
Thank you. And then I am a yes also. So there you go. City Manager, you have your consensus to replace the Highland Ridge sign similar to what the Country Club Ridge sign looks like.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to have a consensus to have staff bring back what we were talking about, an estimate looking at the various number of cross streets or intersections in the remaining 4 and let us know what that would look like? Do we need a consensus for that?
I would assume so.
If that's what you want.
Yeah, because if we're going to do this for 5 neighborhoods. Then we need to find out how many signs for toppers, which ones would work better with a monument sign. So yeah, let's get a consensus on that. Did everybody understand Vice Mayor's consensus? All right, seeing no objections or questions to it, Vice Mayor, obviously I would assume you're a yes?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks?
Yes.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes.
And I'm a hesitant yes for information. Not a fan of it, but and I'd also like to make sure that the police department weighs in on these toppers to ensure that there is no chance of problems with emergency calls. Because I saw that the Fairmont one, and it does look like a street sign. The other one that is smaller, the one that says green corridor, that sign would probably work better than Fairmont because it does look like a street sign. And I don't want there to be any problems for 911 services.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
the deputy chief is on this meeting if you'd like him to weigh in, but he did let me know that dispatch actually thinks this is not a bad idea at all because it does provide an additional form of identification for an area. If you want more detailed information, he can pipe up.
Not necessary. Thank you, though. All right, so you have your consensus, city manager. Did you want to put a time frame to that? Or is it just something that staff will get to us and we'll have another meeting?
I prefer that last one. We'll get you.
All right, so I think we've covered everything with the signs. Is that correct, city manager or Miss Julie or Miss Nicole?
Yes, ma'am. And I'd like to proceed to work with the city police department and start identifying the type of neighborhood watch signs. And we will follow back up with the commission as to the type of designs. So commission will approve those for us.
All right. Do you need a consensus? Do you need a consensus?
I have a question on that. I didn't know there was a variety of neighborhood watch signs. So can I get a little clarification of what that is?
There's several, of course, neighborhood watch groups throughout the city in different neighborhoods, and kind of similar to these signs for identifying the neighborhoods and the subdivisions. They expressed they wanted to have maybe different types of signs, or maybe we have only one design. But we'd like the opportunity to work further with the police department and get their input and then bring back those designs to the commission. So it could either be a couple different designs, depending on if it's a large neighborhood versus a smaller one, or it could just be a standard for all of them.
Thank you for the explanation. To me, the consistency of when I drive down a street and I look up and I see that blue and white neighborhood watch, I know that neighborhood is protected. If it's different, if it's not consistent, I mean, it's like painting in my opinion, painting a stop sign green or whatever. It's the consistency of seeing that neighborhood watch that alerts the people to know that it is protected. So that's why I was a little taken back that there were differences, potential differences. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so before we move on to the next part of this revitalization, did we cover everything that we needed covered, city manager, regarding signs?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. There was a lot more to this revitalization than just signs and this implementation strategy update that we were trying to have conversations on before. Before I weigh in on the things that I wanted to kind of get clarification on this strategy update. Did anybody else have any questions on that? Or did staff want to continue on with the next part of the presentation or a question?
We don't have any further presentation regarding the update report. We provided information that was requested, more detailed information. We tried to get as much as we could in terms of what is specifically being done, because that was what was requested the last time when it came to certain pieces of information, finding out exactly like what fire is doing for the like the door-to-door inspections and the installations and those types of things. And so we've tried to provide as much of that information as we could, and we're here for questions if you need it.
So revitalization to me is not just the signs. It's not just neighborhood identity. It's to keep the blight out of the neighborhood. And that's what I thought a lot of this conversation was going to be on, was to prevent blight from taking over neighborhoods, from abandoned homes to abandoned cars to the real meat and potatoes of revitalization of older neighborhoods and keeping the other neighborhoods from going into blight. We had planning and zoning had talked about an overlay district in their department feedback. And I'd like to get a little bit of a better understanding as to what does that mean and what does that entail?
So if you go back to the original report, which I don't think we touched this, but the original report, one of the recommendations from the consultant was to look at different ways to implement redevelopment in these areas. So one of the examples he gave was putting another small business in a parking lot where a parking lot's not being fully utilized to try to incentivize a more dense development. And so the overlay district is a way for us to reevaluate and provide new zoning rules for that. And you'll actually see that as a budget request coming up in the next few weeks. We've talked about it a lot in terms of the form-based code, and that will really help stir that up. And that's the way to do it and to look at that overlay district.
All right. So it sounds like it'll be a bigger conversation. Vice Mayor, go ahead, please.
I have some friends who live in those 5 neighborhoods, and there's not been one negative comment since over the last couple of years. It's been positive. Some of the snowbird type resident comes back and they're like, wow, this neighborhood has really improved. And I'm going to give credit to that. We had a lot of change in staff after that 2017 era and before. And I'm going to give credit to Frank and his department, the code enforcement. We didn't have houses being boarded up and condemned in the past. We do now. Police is out there maintaining the vigilance in there. I mean, I know people who contact me and then contact the police, and they send the officers out there. So there has been an enhancement, a revitalization that has truly come over the last couple of years. And to me, credit needs to go where credit is due. And those 2 departments of police and neighborhood development, code enforcement in particular, I believe need a pat on the back. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with that sentiment, Vice Mayor, because yes, things have improved dramatically in the code enforcement area. While everybody doesn't like having code enforcement called on them, they're the first ones that say, hey, my neighbors isn't doing this, and why isn't code enforcement? So it's a blessing and a curse, and it depends on which side of the fence they're sitting on, which side you think it is. So yeah.
No, I wouldn't want to do their job.
They're doing a great job. And it has improved. And I do see a lot of positive changes in the neighborhood. So yes, kudos, and thank you for bringing that up. The utilities in their department feedback mentioned a housing corporation. And I'd like to get a better understanding as to what exactly is that and what are the legalities of something like that?
You'll have to bear with me. I'm gonna try to see if I can pull up one of the more original documents that talks about that, because it's not something I'm super familiar with. It was one of the recommendations that came out of the original study.
Mayor, while she's looking that up, can I mention the one underneath for code enforcement? It's the rental home identification. If I remember correctly, the state spoke to that, and I don't even know if that can be on our list anymore. So food for thought for staff and ourselves.
Yeah, that's one of my other questions that I have on this also.
So the Housing Corporation, I'm going to read this from the original report. What it said is creating opportunities that focuses on creating opportunities that focus on creating I can't talk right now, I'm sorry. That focus on creating owner-occupied residences will help stabilize the neighborhoods. One manner to accomplish this is to establish a nonprofit housing corporation that funds down payment assistance, repair and maintenance funds, and property upgrades. This is a long-term project that requires commitment and participation from community leaders, businesses, and industries who may stand to gain from the creation. Ideally, those who are serving in public safety, nursing, teaching, or other similar community service industries are priority targets. It helps create opportunities to revitalize the most distressed properties in the neighborhood. So utilities' response was that they support these findings in helping residents set up a housing corporation, or possibly applying for CDBG funds or a tax increment financing district to include these properties. So resources and funding for this is an ongoing project, because those are going to be the biggest components to that. But it's definitely something that they're interested in helping our residents pursue.
So if funding wasn't an option, how would this look? What would be the purpose of it? I'm not able to grasp that.
I believe it's a means of providing assistance for lower income or elderly communities.
Because if this is coming from the utilities department, they're an enterprise fund. So could they fund? Could they fund this? I don't even know what this looks like. What the purpose of it is.
So I think this is one that, sorry, I lost my place. I think this is in the utilities, because one of the biggest things in this area is the infrastructure, which is aging. A lot of these pipes are, 50, 60 years old. And so as time goes on within the interior of the homes, those residents are going to need are going to need to replace that. And being that it is one of the lower income areas of the city, that becomes challenging for a lot of these areas. So the Housing Corporation, I believe in this case, is designed to help fill that gap and help them get the resources they need.
All right, I'm all done.
Yeah, that one would probably be a larger conversation that we would need to do more research on if there's more interest in pursuing it. so that we can provide more detail of what we would be proposing with that.
I know that we've had a few different conversations about the Nice Guys program, and I am only referring to it because it's something that everybody pretty much understands. I'm not saying staff driven, I'm not saying code enforcement driven, it's just the concept. We had asked to see about implementing something like that, whether it be Serve Florida, whether it be Nice Guys, whatever name you want to put on it, for community involvement to help paint someone's home, to help clean up overgrown growth, to help, you know, maybe wash a house. I don't know, whatever would take to help enhance someone's home so that it doesn't create this blight that slowly starts to eat away at a neighborhood. And I was wondering what came back from that request.
Well, Mayor, you know, we have done an event with the Serve Florida. We did look into, as far as the employee-driven one, the Nice Guys program. Unfortunately, at this point in time, there's not the interest that there was at one point. Trying to gather something like that isn't as easy as one might imagine. But to be completely honest, it's not really gained any traction in anywhere. I mean, if you specifically want us to take employee time and do that, we can do it. But as far as the history of it is, it's always been volunteer, and I know that that's the direction we've gone, and we have done efforts. Like I said, the city does plenty of efforts through volunteer things like the neighborhood cleanup programs. I know Julie has for years led our coastal cleanup processes that we do a couple times a year. So we have done some things that are just not specific to a single neighborhood. They're more generic citywide.
And I wasn't, again, referring to it as being an employee-driven kind of program, but a community-driven program. And I know Commissioner Hanks had mentioned this Serve Florida, and we did do the thing for the disc golf with Serve Florida and had great feedback and participation. I just was wondering if that's something that we would be exploring or not now, because code enforcement seems to have taken care of neighborhood issues. I just don't want it to fall off the radar, because it was something that the commission was very interested in trying to do.
Yes, ma'am. And I'll just continue to use the Serve Florida one because that one did work out very well. As you stated, it is community-based. Staff more than willing to do that. I believe, like the way they do it in Venice and the way that we were doing it here, it's a once-a-year thing. As far as Serve Florida, we are certainly open to do it more than that. That is community-based. I will tell you from a staff perspective, we're always open when organizations like that want to come forward. We're more than willing to assist and make that happen. And like you said, when it's community-based, we do rely on the community to come to us with that kind of stuff. That being said, we're always available and willing to work with them.
Okay. All right. We also talked about instituting a dumpster program. So that way, then it would help prevent the illegal dumping that's happening all over the city. And we gave direction for staff to come back with how that would look and how it would be implemented, pros and cons, and haven't heard anything. And I'm just wondering what's going on with that.
Julie, I know Frank put together some information, Frank Lamar, solid waste district person. So I don't know, Julie, if you can speak to that right now or not. But you have to unmute first.
Thank you, City Manager. We have, on occasion, for various types of emergencies, have done dumpster programs. They're not very successful. They tend to be a haven for residents outside of the area to deposit things. In addition, we have to be very careful with Florida Department of Environmental Protection rules and so forth anytime you're doing anything on long term. What works out much better is what we just did with COVID, is to have a drop off here at our location. Public Works. We also had it at both ends of the city, out here at Chamberlain and on Pan American. That works very well. Something we also talked about doing a couple times a year is going through the communities as part of our 2 annual cleanups and target communities that need to be cleaned up and go in with dumpsters in that fashion and clean up the neighborhoods that way. So it's more controlled by staff, and we can always have the residents participating with us, but the danger is leaving the dumpsters unattended. That becomes a problem.
Thank you. Vice Mayor touched on a little bit about this rental home identification. Is that something staff is saying that it's necessary to have a program, but there's nothing available in the budget? Now I'm concerned with the short-term rentals and vacation rentals. How can you even determine that kind of thing and identify rental homes? How does that work? How would that look? Again, if money is no object.
Yeah, so for one piece of that, it's on the 5+ years out list, because it's definitely a much larger project and a bigger conversation that needs to be had. I think also, as was mentioned, the Florida statutes are constantly being amended in terms of rental home, short-term rentals and vacation home rentals and how those are managed. So I think that's definitely a key component to watch. It was a recommendation that came out of the study, because if you're more aware of the rental homes, you can make sure you manage the quality of them. The city I came from prior to working here used to have annual inspections of them to make sure the living standards were up to par. So it's just how each city wants to handle it. There's a lot of different ways it could be done. If the commission has no desire to do it, then we certainly don't have to.
The last one that I have, we kind of touched on with the signs and the discussion about the neighborhoods going from the 71 to whatever magic number, whether it be 20 or 120, and then identifying those actual neighborhoods. When is that going to happen? Because our comp plan is not current with the mapping. And part of the reason that we weren't going to make the comp plan current mapping is that we wanted to have the discussion about these other neighborhoods and 20 neighborhoods or 120 neighborhoods. When is that conversation going to take place?
So I believe we are trying to coordinate it with some of the discussions on city-owned properties, because we wanted to see if there were any of those that were in the center of those neighborhoods that we could coordinate to be part of what we were calling like kind of the focal point for the neighborhoods. So the next time that comes back, it was actually, I believe, on an agenda item previously to discuss, but the rest of the discussion kind of took over that agenda item and it got lost in it. So when the next time that comes back up, it will be part of the discussion.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have on this. I don't know if anybody else had any questions. I know seeing nothing, hearing nothing. All right, we'll go ahead and move on then. Oh, I do have one more. I'm sorry, I do have one more. There's a code that says lien relief does not apply to liens from fines imposed after October of 2010. So if I was to buy a distressed, not I, but if someone was to buy a distressed property that had fines imposed, I could not get and ask for a reduction in that or elimination of that because it's after 2010?
Let's see, I'm not sure if Mr. Miles is on this meeting or not, because I had asked him to be. I know you mentioned something earlier, actually isn't here, so yep, the whole room of them. One of those people in there is Frank Miles.
Nice.
We have our code enforcement team here as well, and thank you Commission for the kudos that you've given. This is our administrative team for code enforcement, and they do work hard to answer not only your inquiries, but inquiries of the residences. To answer your question, we have Trista of our code enforcement administrative team who handles the liens, and she's prepared to address that concern.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Trista Castle, Administrative Services Specialist. I just want to let you know, within that code 2-511, section 1, that is the lien reduction program, which is for the liens that ran before the city had a cap. Prior to ordinance number 2010-48, there were not caps on our fines. So there may be an address number code violation that's $300,000 because it's been running since 2008. So the lien reduction brings it down to what the current fee structure has in 2-511. So the lien release program is usually what is facilitated usually, and that's for a judicially imposed sale. So if someone buys something from a foreclosure or a tax deed sale, that's the one that's used the most often.
Okay.
That makes sense?
I think so. So the lien reduction, so if I'm in, let's say I'm in my home and I have a lien and fines prior to 2010, I can't get those reduced, or I could?
You could if they were more than the current cap, which is in our code right now.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Fantastic. Are there a lot of those that are outstanding?
I've ran across a few. Not really. It seems that those properties back then that were in that type of situation at this point have been foreclosed on and have used the lien release program to get rid of those.
Excellent. All right. That's what I was hoping was in place, because if you couldn't reduce any fines and lien, I was afraid that it would prevent somebody from possibly buying up a distressed property and fixing and stuff. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yep. No problem. Thank you.
All right. That's all I got now, guys. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. So we will go ahead and close out that discussion and then move on to the COVID-19 financial effects. And I will turn that over to City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I get too far into it, I'll ask the clerk if she could add Kim Farrell and Christine McDade to the room. They're both help put this item together. You all asked for some additional information, which we've given you. Some of it's in the legislative text. And you'll see that the estimates are still pretty much in the same range that we discussed about a month or so ago, where we think the impacts are going to be. One of the things I did want to let you know is, and you'll hear this in about 10 days when we start having our budget conversations for next year's budget, is we did reduce the amount of surtax funding that we're expecting to come in next year by 7.5%. We did that just to be conservative, because it's easier to take it away now than find out it doesn't come in later. So, as you know, I always go on the conservative side of revenue. That way we don't run into any issues. But some of the information that's in the backup is like the EFMLA list. As I told you when we last met, we had a significant number of people out on the emergency, or the EFMLA, which was the new program put in place because of this COVID. That was also at the very beginning of this, and most of those people were on there just while they were trying to figure out what to do with the shutdown of services such as daycare and other items like that. Most of those people, as you'll see, were down to, when this list was put on there, 4 employees on it and 4 that were on the intermittent portion of it. So it's significantly less than, I believe we had 70 something on it last time we talked. But since that's for a short period of time, and we have all adapted, we've some things like daycare have reopened, so we're in a lot better place than we were then. Let's see what else is in here. The vacancy report that you asked for is on there. You can see what vacancies we have and how long they've been vacant. Some of them are rotating, like the empty police officer ones, we have continued to leave certain positions that we didn't consider either essential or we would not have the ability to train them. So those positions have remained vacant. But some of them, like I say, that we do have the ability to train, or we will need to get them, or we're in the process knowing that we're reaching the end of this COVID scenario. We are still moving forward with the hiring process of certain positions. So you have that list. The CIP update list that you asked for is there as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all to see if you have any additional questions, but the information you asked for, I believe, has been provided.
Okay, and before you do, I just want the clerk to realize that I don't see Commissioner Emmerich's name on here. I'm not too sure when he disappeared. So I would probably say within the past.
I'm putting him back in. He's in the other side.
Okay, so he is here?
He's here.
I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I just had to make sure. Thank you for that. All right, so we'll go ahead and didn't mean to interrupt you, City Manager. Please go ahead.
No, ma'am. Actually, I was turning it over to you.
Okay.
One question I did have for you all in our continued efforts to not spend money that may not be critical at this point, but is budgeted for this year. Typically, right around this time, we start the community survey. Basically, we do a sampling of the community. They evaluate their interaction with the city, think how we're doing beyond just city services, but you tend to get that report sometime October, November, but we start the process around now. We have not started it right yet, mainly because of all the COVID it's not as always as easy to get the information, and also because most of the stuff that people would deal with, they don't get the opportunity to deal with because the business has been closed, the city's been closed. It's hard to give you a fair statement on their interaction with city services if they're not using them, or even the business community as a whole. So my recommendation actually is to skip the survey for this year, mainly because of all the disruption in every area of everybody's life right now. That savings, that cost last year was $19,160. Seems like an easy thing. I don't recommend we skip it forever, but I do think that this year might be a good one to bypass. Like I said, because right about now is when we would be starting it. So I'm bringing that to you all, mainly because budget is something, if you all are good with skipping, then we'll save the $19,000 this year.
Thank you. So before we move on, let's get a consensus to forego the community survey or have discussion on if we're going to do the pros and cons of skipping the community survey, citizen survey. Don't see anybody who wants to have the discussion, so we'll just go ahead and do a consensus.
Mayor, excuse me, just so you know, we have public comment on this one. I don't know if you wanted to hear that as well.
Thank you. Let's do the consensus, and then we'll go on to public comment. So the consensus to skip the citizen survey for this year. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks? I don't see him. Oh, there he is. Commissioner?
Yeah, I'm okay with that this year.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, sir.
I am okay with that this year.
Thank you. Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So that is your consensus, City Manager. Thank you for that.
Mayor, I will say I do believe that is exponentially important to us every year, but due to the nature of where we're at right now, I do agree with that. I think it can be postponed one more year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement for everything that City Manager stated. I mean, it's kind of a different sort of year, and I don't know how you would go about getting appropriate responses. So I'm in agreement with that also.
Thank you.
And Mayor, I just want to say that I think you all touched on exactly the reasons, why I wanted to skip it this year. I don't think it would be as valid of a report and give you the information that we've looked for historically on it. But I will tell you that it is in next year's budget. So
I hope so.
Literally saving the $19,000 this year, but it's not having a next year budgetary impact, because I do believe it is important. We've done it for, I believe, the last 3 or 4 years. And I think it's something that provides you all information on a statistically community-wide basis, as opposed to a handful of people you might hear of because they're always vocal.
Right. Thank you. City Clerk, if you could go ahead and read public comment, and then I have a couple questions about this, and I don't know if anybody else has any questions or discussion on this. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Public comment from Ashlyn Schneider. She writes, can we please get an update on when City Hall is opening? As a permit runner for most of Southwest Florida, Northport is one of the only places not allowing social distancing reopening. Also, please consider hiring some more permitting employees. I know the employees are doing their best, but wait times are getting longer and it'll get worse. Building isn't slowing down anytime soon. Don't let your people burn out. Also, I can't wait for the water park to reopen. A lot of money got put into that, and it would be a shame if all summer went by without it being used.
Ms. Heather, was that for this discussion item, or was that for general?
It says it was for this discussion item.
Thank you very much. Is there any others for this discussion item?
No.
Okay. All right. Vice Mayor, you had the floor is yours.
I want to make a statement, and that is, through this COVID era that's going on, we have had all the permitting, the payments, all of that running through that little drive-through alongside City Hall. And people's personalities and their temperaments and stuff, this is a stressful time. And I think sometimes people are a little more short-tempered and not as patient. And so I have to give kudos to these people who stand, these employees who stand daily at that drive-through and handle car after car after car after car after car after contractor. They've been fighting a good fight. And if nothing else is given to them, I want to give a huge virtual hug to them and let them know that they're appreciated for their service, definitely.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the discussion item? Seeing none, go ahead, Vice Mayor. You'll have to unmute yourself, hon. You're mute. There you go.
Thank you. It flashed up and told me that whole what. So thank you. With regards to the CIP, I went through this looking at it, and I think there's a lot of large ticket items that pull money from surtax, some of it from general fund, that I think I'd like to hear how the city manager views these spendings for this year, and then is thinking of these going into next year, because some of them are ticketed over $1 million. And personally, myself, amenities, I view Park and Rec a whole lot of amenities. And so I think those types of items should be looked at first if we're going to be doing some trimming. So wondering what he feels or how he feels when looking at this year and next year with the CIP chart, how he feels about it. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager.
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't have any feelings. So that being said, all the projects that are in there Yes, there are certain projects that are in here that are more important than others. I'm not going to deny that, and most of them are large dollar item. And if you have specific ones that you'd like to talk about, because the fun part for me of giving you an opinion on any one of the projects is a lot of these projects have one or two or three or four of you that really liked them. So that'd be a whole lot of fun to say, well, I just think that's dumb. Then find out that that's something all five of you thought was the best project we could ever do. That being said, there are some that could definitely be delayed, but I also want to point out that every project in here is fully funded. We have the money to pay for all of these, either on hand or what's coming in between now and the rest of the year. But we're not into a deficit scenario with any of these projects. And for next year's surtax funding that is going to be coming to you on the 16th through the 18th budget workshops, those projects are also fully funded based on the reduced amounts that we believe are going to come in next year. Like I said, finance, when they put next year's budget together, assumed in the surtax funding a 7.5% decrease in funding, where typically we anticipate an increase. So we've already reduced it by 7.5%. And the projects that you'll see when you get the budget here in the next few days for next year, there is the funding available for them. So we've already gone through and eliminated projects that we either don't feel we'll have the funding for, or we reduce the funding and make sure we didn't put anything in there that we can't pay for. So if there's a specific project that you'd like to go over, I'm more than willing to do that. As you'll see, I did go through the list. There are several in Parks and Rec. Like you say, it looks like there's only a handful of them that aren't either started already or and just looking at the page that I have in front of me on that list, there's only about 4 or 5 of them that they haven't actually started. And I'm always hesitant to stop a project that we've started because then you're just throwing away the money that you've already spent. But if what I'm looking at is on page 2 of 6 of that CIP report, you can see there's a nice little block of about 4 projects that haven't really started. And I don't know that I would recommend delaying any of those simply because of what they are. I think that they are strong needs or amenities our community could use. The sound improvements is probably the cheapest one on there for the George Mullen and the Morgan Family Center. And those are long overdue. Those need to happen in order to make those facilities more usable anyway.
I agree with those statements. Go up a little bit to the Spring Haven land acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fully funded at the $1.5 million?
It is, and I'll tell you right now, that's for the nature corridor that we were trying to buy the handful of lots. We bought the 5, I think it was, and then there's the one owner that owns the rest of them. That land is not worth anywhere near the amount of money that they've been asking for it. And right now, the purchase of those lots that they had tried to sell, I believe, for $1.3 million, it's not moving forward. It's not going anywhere. They want more than the $1.3 million for it, and our appraisal puts it somewhere closer to the $600,000 range. So I really don't see that money spending anytime soon, even though it is funded.
I'm sorry, City Manager and Vice Mayor, are you talking about the project for Parks and Rec for the Myakkahatchee Creek Greenway for Heron Creek?
No, ma'am. I believe she's talking about on that same page, about halfway up, there's a project that says Spring Haven land acquisition for $1.5 million. It shows that we've spent $73,000. It's almost right in the middle of the page, of page 2.
I'm sorry. What department is it under?
Parks and Rec. It's in Parks and Recreation.
Okay, Spring Haven land acquisition. Thank you. Okay, now I see.
Remember, there was basically 2 groups of people that owned that land. There was the Q something, which are the ones we bought, and then there was the one property owner that wanted to sell them, which actually triggered this whole thing for $1 million. Right. They still want the $1.3 million. It actually went off the market for a while. We contacted the owner instead of a real estate broker at that point in time because they pulled it off the market, and we were able to then contact the the owner directly, and they didn't get any hits the first time they tried to sell it. So, and except for us, where we were saying that it was worth less, about half of what they wanted to sell it for. So we didn't get anywhere with that. Now they've, after getting 0 offers other than ours, when they had it for $1.3 million, now they're asking $1.5 million. So I'm not quite sure how in a supply and demand world that works, but you can ask whatever you want. But we're not, it's not worth that much.
Right.
I believe their appraisal, their valuation of it is coming from something that they believe they can do that they're not technically allowed to do at this point in time. It would require a lot of change. Special exceptions, the good kind of stuff you all know all too well about.
Yeah. All right. So the 73,000 that has been, or almost 74, that is for those 5 lots. That's completely done.
Yes, ma'am. That was I think it was Q Smith, if I'm remembering the name. But either way, those are done.
Over and done. It's not going on. So that leaves a whole lot of money left right there. Can that be utilized for something else in case we have an emergency or we need it for something different?
Yes, ma'am. It's surtax. It is surtax dollars. It's right now planned to buy those. Yeah, that's what you reallocated it from the Springhaven Drive extension to buying this land. The commission has the authority to reallocate it. It would just basically take your direction. But right now, the only thing that I would be spending it on would be purchasing lots that I can't get somebody to sell me anyway. So it's either going to sit there unspent trying to buy property that somebody wants more than it's worth, or it's just going to sit there and you all know that it's available when needed.
Okay. That one was an important one to me. Just an update on, if you go a few more up above that, you'll see the disc golf course. It says volunteer groups not responsive. I mean, I've had people telling me, why aren't we going forward with that? Why aren't we continuing with that? They were waiting for another surge of volunteers to go out. So we've got 50,000 sitting there for that one too, and have only spent 6,500. Are we in the same way as the land acquisition?
No, ma'am. That one has a little bit of a different scenario we're running into because of where it is. I don't believe Sandy's on this call, our Parks and Rec director, but we're running into some permitting issues with Swift Mud and everything. So we're working through that process. That's why that one's taking longer than was anticipated. Excuse me, I can get you something out though as an update on that if that's what the commission would like. But we did, as was mentioned earlier when we talked about the community volunteering, we did have the day where we had a bunch of volunteers help and go clear out some land. And now we're trying to take the next step. But as you know, with projects like this, we have several hoops we have to jump through. Some are our own and some are not. And Sandy said that her hand is raised. So if you want to, not Sandy Knowles, but Sandy Funheller, if you want to pull her into this room, I can give you a quick update. All she has to do is unmute and she's yours.
Miss Sandy, if you could please unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Funheller, Parks and Recreation Director. For the disc golf, the comment that the volunteers have not been responsive, that's not the volunteers to help us. That was with the clearing and the event that we did before. That was the disc golf groups that we were working with to lay out the course and design it. You can have a professional company design your course, but we were trying to avoid that and work with volunteer groups, disc golf groups, to get it designed. We have not had success in getting them to finalize that for us. And so at this point, we are developing an RFQ or an RFP. We haven't decided what it would be in order to get that designed and installed. But we have not moved forward except to get the Swift Mud permitting And we had already done some surveys out there. That's why there's some expenditures out of the project.
Thank you for clarifying that, because that's immediately where my mind went to, was all those volunteers that were out there. And so thank you for clarifying that. At this point, Mayor, I'll go ahead and relinquish the floor. I mean, I've got more highlighted where things could be brought over if we needed to, but I think it's kind of like what city manager already stated. If we did need it, we could make a decision as commission to utilize the surtax where it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. So I did a little bit of research on surtax funding and what we've received for these past few months, and compared it to what we received in the same time frame last year. Just between the surtax funding that we received in April versus the surtax funding we received in May, which is like a month behind, we're down 23% in funding in just surtax. It's also the half cent sales tax. We're down about 23%. That's a huge number. And if you compare last year's total dollars in surtax for this same time period to this year's, it averages out to be about a 2% decline in revenue, because we were so high up prior to COVID hitting. I'm not a forecaster or anything like that, but common sense kind of says we're going to continue to see less money collected the rest of this fiscal year than what we have collected last fiscal year from month for month. So that concerns me. And I know we have a lot of projects slated to begin in these next 5 months that maybe we should just hold off until like next year and see where that money is going to be available, if it's going to be available. And if everything evens out and we get back up to the surtax being collected above and beyond what we were at last year, then we could just pick up where we left off. But like city manager already said, it seems silly to stop a project midstream. And it seems silly to start projects not knowing if there's funding going to be available if we continue to see double-digit losses in revenues. And I have a couple ideas of projects that we could say, well, let's put the brakes on it because they haven't started yet, and see if we just say hold off, because when the time comes, if the city manager knows that we, for example, the IT for the video surveillance of 5 senses, granted, that's one project I think is necessary, but if they haven't set out an RFP or an RFQ yet, why are we going to proceed? We may not have the funding for it. We may need to have funding for other projects. The fiber installation on Pan American, they received a quote, but they're reviewing piggyback options. So why would we continue researching that if there's a possibility there isn't going to be funding available? It just concerns me. We've got 5 months left and we don't know what the impact is going to be. We've already heard from Miss Virginia that our visitors to the area have decreased 90% or more month over month these past couple months. Is it going to jump up automatically and go back to the way it was last year? I don't see that in these next 5 months. And I just want to express concern and say, hey, maybe we need to put some of these projects on hold until this all plays out and put it into next year's budget. That's kind of where I'm going with it, because when you see a 23% decline in 1 month of surtax funding, that's pretty huge and it's pretty substantial, and it's enough to make my eyes pop open. And I know city manager is planning a 7.5% reduction in surtax, is that for the rest of this fiscal year or is that for next year?
So that's a 7.5% decrease in revenue for the entire next fiscal year, not on any one month. It's the whole amount we receive, which is a little less than, well, this year the budget was $11.7 million. So we took the amount that we had anticipated to come in for next year and we reduced it by 7.5% from what it's going to be.
So that 7.5% reduction is for the next fiscal year.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that would make sense because I would think come October, we've got a whole new season coming up, barring any other craziness that's happening in this world and unforeseens. That would make sense. But I'm also focusing on these next 5 months of this fiscal year. We've already seen a 23% drop in 1 month. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, city manager, or if anybody else does.
So some of those projects, like you said, I mean, if you have specific projects you wanted to discuss, I mean, I know you mentioned the fiber installation on Pan American. The downside to killing that project is it also increases a different expense because what we were planning to do, run fiber from one of our facilities to another, and that would eliminate the operating expense of having to have Comcast or one of the internet providers provide us that service. We'd be able to do it ourselves. So you're saving $31,000, but you're also increasing a different line.
Yeah, and I completely forgot about that. So thank you for reminding me of that. And I personally wouldn't be in favor of reducing the surveillance of the Garden of Five Senses because we've already had problems out there, and we need to make sure that we can catch bad guys when we can. But there's also another project of the Myakkahatchee Creek Greenway, the Heron Creek one, where the RFP is in purchasing, but nothing's formally going out. Maybe that's one of those projects we just hold off on.
I'm sorry, which one were you referring to?
P10 MCG. It's the last one on page 1, at least on my printout.
Okay, I see it.
I mean, that's almost $1.4 million we could hold off on because we don't know what's going to be coming in these next 5 months in surtax.
So I don't know if Sandy wants to give you an update on where they are on that project of what a delay may or may not mean. I'll let her give you that one, but you do know what it's a Greenway Park, and I'll let her give the update. She's unmuted herself.
Sure, thank you. Sandy Funheller, Parks and Recreation Director. That one has had some questions from purchasing on the request for bid, and we have gone back to the engineer to update the tabulation sheet and make a note on the plans that was required. Beyond that, it's ready to go out. I just want to also remind you that that is one that we had a developer contribution towards to complete that project. So it's, as far as I know, it's all ready to go. Once we get that from the engineer, if we don't do it, there probably will be additional costs when we get back to it for any surveys that we have to redo because of time frame. And if by chance there's any code changes, we would have to update plans, and that would be an additional cost with our engineer.
And when I say postpone it, I'm not talking about years. I'm just saying until the next fiscal year, pull that money out because I know it's got a developer's contribution to it, but it hasn't gone out for bid yet.
No, you're correct. It hasn't. I just want to make sure everybody understands that there could be additional costs if we delay it because there may be some surveys. And I was trying to get an answer before the meeting today on what those costs might be. I didn't get that answer yet, but they won't be astronomical, but there could be additional costs.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, I think it's just what Sandy's trying to say, and this applies to every project. And we apply for permits just like when people come to us for permits. They're only good for so long. And I understand you're not saying delay it for an extended period of time, but and without knowing the specifics of of which permits and when, 6 months could make or break to where we would have to go back out for the permit. And I think it's not that we can or can't do it. We're just trying to, as you know, I like to make sure you guys are aware of all of the pros and cons of everything. And sometimes delaying something 6 months might mean we need to fill out another $5,000 permit or something. As Sandy stated, I don't know, and she wasn't able to get the answer to that before this meeting either for this specific one, but just making sure you're aware of sometimes there are consequences to delaying things as well. So that's what if the board wants to do that and that's the will of the body, then we will.
Well, what about the Park Pavilion at Blue Ridge? It's on page 2. It's the update is saying that the cement work is an additional threshold and you're looking for piggyback options. That might be one we can hold off on.
Again, we certainly could hold off on that one. Our intent was to use a piggyback to get better pricing. However, we've looked at the concrete pad that it currently exists there, and we feel that it does need to be replaced. And the piggyback did not allow for that to also occur within the piggyback because of the dollar amount threshold. So we need to now put it out to bid and cannot use a piggyback. So, it can be delayed. That's up to commission if you want to go that direction.
Well, it sounds like this project isn't going to be moving forward anytime soon because you have to put it out for bid. So maybe this is one of those that'll save us $300,000 in surtax, which is basically, it's not a lot of money, but it will help if we continue to see double-digit reduction in surtax dollars coming in.
Yeah, it has not gone out. It's in purchasing.
So the other one is the police headquarters expansion. City manager, do you have a better update on that one?
Yeah, that one's delayed.
That one's delayed?
Yeah.
So we could definitely just take that out of this fiscal year and put it right into next fiscal year if there's funding available.
Yeah, that money, I can tell you that money won't be spent this year anyway.
Okay, so
it can just sit there. You don't.
I'm sorry?
I would say that you don't need to do anything on it anyway, because the next step in that project is going to be bringing you a report, which still hasn't come to me in any acceptable format. So that you won't see that $400,000 spent this fiscal year anyway.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how will this progress if we don't give you some kind of direction today to say stop this project now in these next 5 months. Then that means to me that your staff is going to proceed with green light with everything going on, and we don't know for sure if these tax dollars, these surtax dollars, are going to be coming in. I'm sorry.
So if you're referring to the Greenway one that we were talking about, then yes, if you don't give us direction, we will continue to move forward with it because we will follow the direction we have, which is to move forward with it. If the commission wants us to hold off on that the McAhatchee Greenway project, then you need to tell us, because what you have told us already is what we're following, which is to do the project.
Correct.
So with that one specifically, yes. If you want me to stop, I need the direction to stop.
So what happens if the surtax dollars continue to not come in at the same pace as they did last year and in the budgeted amount that we had budgeted for, and now we start to see a deficit because we've got 5 more months?
Mm-hmm.
Since then.
So as you know, every fund we have has a fund balance. If the revenue doesn't come in, we actually have the fund balance in that fund right now to cover the rest of what is supposed to come in this year in revenue. Never my recommendation, but it could happen. That being said, we're still budgeted to receive about $5.1 million more in surtax revenue between now and the end of the year. If we get
Based
that,
on pre-COVID predictions, though.
exactly, as we said, based on the budget. And if that money doesn't come in, we do have the fund balance to cover it. Again, not my recommendation, and that's kind of why we're having this conversation today. If you have a project, like you said, the Myakatch Greenway, the Springhaven properties, as we see these numbers not coming in, we will adapt, and I would come to you all and say, you know, we're supposed to have $5.1 million and we only got the 0.1. We're going to have another conversation. We're also going to have a conversation in 10 days preparing for next year's budget. I'm pretty positive I won't have any better information for you in 10 days than I have today. It's one of those things where in a month, we monitor it constantly. As the numbers stop coming in, or as they start coming back in, if we do have the recovery that we're all hoping for, then everything will be nice and pretty and we'll all be happy. If it doesn't happen, then yes, we'll have to adjust. And then the commission will need to tell us, do you want us to use the fund balance, which does have future year impacts, or do you want us to stop doing some of these projects? If you have some of those projects that you as a commission have decided you're good with holding off on, obviously we'd love to have that information today. So.
Yeah, because when we start our budget talks, it's not so much for what is going on now, it's for the next fiscal year, which is 2021. We're starting to budget for 2021. And I'm concerned about the current budget and will we have the money available to do all the projects in the current budget versus giving you direction to say, well, put the brakes on this, put the brakes on that, put the brakes on this and that.
Yes. So if you have direction you want to give as a board, that's what I need to hear.
Okay. I have a couple others that I would like to kind of get an update on. The Tamiami Trail parking areas, it's already on hold for funding. I'm sorry, yeah, for funding.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that on hold for funding if it's on surtax?
Because we also applied for a grant. That project, as you can see, has a budget of $82,000. That was well, I'm assuming, I guess there's two of them.
I'm looking at the project for Public Works R16 TTP on page 3 for a total budget of $461,200.
Yes, the majority of that actually is not funded from surtax. It was, if I'm remembering right, I don't have the project sheet in front of me. I think it was jointly funded with a grant, and we didn't get the grant. Sorry, there's also another one on the next page. I think one's north and the other south. So
yeah. All right. The Tropicare shared path on page 4, the second item. It's on hold because you want to finish the resurfacing of Tropicare first. That's what the note says, correct?
I believe that to be true, yes. Not to mention there was, I believe there was some funding issues, but because the road itself needs to be done first. And you can see that's about halfway down the page.
And I thought when we first had talked about the multimodal path and resurfacing of Tropicare that we were hoping to do them both together to help save some money. And
it became a funding issue of doing them together. And
right.
We have the amount of money and we did not. Julie can give you an update if you'd like on that, but I can tell you that, you know, we don't have the money all in this year to do that whole project, to do both projects.
So is this budget that it says here of the $2,036,000, is that the total budget for construction too, or is it just this fiscal year budget?
I'm not sure if Julie knows the answer to that. I do not have it in front of me, so I don't know off the top of my head. I'm trying to pull it up. Heather, can you pull Julie back into the room? She doesn't appear to be in here. Or maybe I'm missing it.
She's in there now. She should be on her way. I don't know where she went now. No, she's not in here at all right now.
Maybe she disappeared too.
She's not going to answer you if she's not in the room.
That's true. So while we bring in Miss Julie, Vice Mayor, I see that you had a question. You'll need to unmute.
I hadn't started talking yet that time. I had to get that mouse over there. Personally, myself, I don't have a problem with looking at those two, placing them on hold, the Spring Haven and the Greenway. That is about $3 million. We're anticipating 5 if the budget goes the way it does. So 3 million saved just in case you're put off, just in case is over 50% of that 5 million if it doesn't come in. So I would feel very safe in doing that. The Spring Haven one is a definite given. The Greenway, $5,000 to do over in order to have that shield of protection financially. I got no problem paying $5,000 if I have to redo a permit. So those two I could agree in a postponement, and then allow the other projects to go on. That's my feeling on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
And Mayor, I know you had thrown out the number of 23% earlier. 23% of the entire surtax budget for the year is 2.76 million. So if you were to put both of those projects on hold, it would save that amount, even though I know it's 23% in the 1 month reduction.
Correct.
Extrapolating that over the whole year, which obviously, as you know, we collected more than we anticipated at the beginning of the year. It would, those two alone would save you the amount as if we had lost 23% the whole year.
Okay. And I am aware of that. I just want to save staff's time and energy on projects that may not be able to be funded because none of us have a crystal ball. And if we lost 23% in 1 month, maybe next month we're going to lose 18%, 15%. We have to plan for that. And that's all I was looking to do. And have that conversation so that way then you know what you can move on with and what you can't. So I see Ms. Julie back in the room.
Yes, Mayor, I apologize. I lost connection.
I figured as much.
Sorry about that. Yes, ma'am. This project actually was put on hold for a year because we wanted to concentrate and be able to fund the Tropicare Boulevard reconstruction. We added a lot of work as far as we found a stormwater drainage issue as far as older pipe that has to be replaced, as well as, of course, the dark fiber that we need to install. But in addition to that, we have a lot of areas that have base failure. So because there were so many issues and we're going to have to make sure we have enough money to fund Tropicare Boulevard reconstruction, we asked that the multimodal path be put on hold. Now, this $2 million is not a representation. That's what's currently in the budget for that project. 400 and some thousand is for the design of it. But that is not the final cost for construction.
Thank you, Ms. Julie. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm with you, Vice Mayor, and I agree with after hearing the complete update with the Myakkahatchee Creek project, the walking path, and the the Spring Haven property acquisition. And I would even like to just throw in that pavilion for Blue Ridge, because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. and just hold off on those 3 projects would save some time and for staff, and also help with our surtax funding until we know for sure how quickly we're going to be recovering.
I would not agree with the Blue Ridge. That's been an ongoing project. I would like to see it completed. I mean, you're more than enough safe with the 2 projects that we were talking about. We've already cut out 312,000 from the Greenway out city front Greenway. You've cut out over, I mean, close to 20,000 from the citizen survey. So you're well over $3 million.
But the citizen survey is not surtax money. That comes out of the general fund, correct, City Manager?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But it's still a reduction.
Right.
So I think the 2 major ones, we already did the city front green. So with those 2 major ones, I think you've got enough protection, and I don't think you have to pick at all the smaller projects at this point.
So let's get a consensus to have the city manager and staff hold off on the, unless somebody else wants to talk before we get consensus. Seeing none. So we'll have city manager hold off on project P10MCG and P18SHA, which is the Spring Haven land acquisition, which was basically on hold anyways. On those 2 projects until the next fiscal year, finding out how much we actually get brought in next 5 months. Is that clear as mud, City Manager?
Sorry, just making sure I wasn't muted. Yes, no, that I think those cause the least damage to anything that's in process. I think it also saves the amount of money you were looking for. In the off chance that we do continue to have the declines in revenue, I think you'll be in good shape. Like the Vice Mayor said, that gets you to approximately, between the other project that we cut at the last time we talked about this, ballpark $3 million number. So I think that puts you in a good spot, and it's also the least painful of the 2 projects to put on hold.
All right, so we've got a consensus on the floor, Vice Mayor, or if anybody wants to speak to it before we go ahead and get the consensus. Seeing none, okay, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanks?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so we have that. All right. Is there any other discussion anybody would like to have on this item? City Manager, did we clear everything that you might need to have discussion or direction on?
Yes, ma'am, I'm good.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you to Finance for pulling all of these things together, as well as the directors of all of the departments. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, guys. All right, so now we are at the final public comment. Is there any out there that we need to get commented on?
Yes, we do have one, and I just wanted to add that we did receive this in time for the first public comment, but we had a computer issue, so we weren't able to see it. And I had emailed Ms. Leach and let her know.
Go ahead, please.
This is from Judy Leach. Her comment is, why aren't Northport city offices open? Local stores and restaurants have been open for weeks with restrictions, so why not city offices? You have the ability to social distance, enforce wearing masks, and the staff to properly sanitize areas. Others have adjusted to the new normal. You have inconvenienced the taxpayers long enough. It's time to get down to business once again. If stay-at-home employees are still considered non-essential, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your staffing needs.
Thank you. Is there any other public comments?
That's all that we have.
Thank you very much. All right, so now we will move on to commission communications. Vice Mayor.
I received an email from Florida League of City, and I re-upped for the committee that I'm currently on. They were asking us to select what committees, so I just re-upped for what I was on. I know we have a discussion with that after election times or that, but just to let everybody know, I re-upped for the one that I'm on. Also to make known Janet Luiki, her and Marty have been huge volunteers within the community, especially the fire department. They're part of CERT, and she passed on the 28th. So just want to honor an excellent volunteer for our city, and give condolence to Marty. I want to speak to July 4th, our fireworks. Wondering if we can't park cars in every parking lot or parking space, not just every other. I mean, that's what I think. I already stated about utility staff, and again, kudos to them. The last thing that I have is a plea for the Northport and Venice graduations. They're in need of a stage, and they're lacking money in their budgets too, because they have had to produce, you know, computers and hotspots and these different things. And they're going to have graduation on July 16th at the Brave Stadium, and there needs to be a stage. So if anybody's got any kind of leverage with anybody owning a stage that could be utilized, have them reach out to me, and I'll give you the name and number of the people at the high school, because the graduating class of 2020 has had it rough, and I would like to see their graduation go as smoothly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanks.
Yes, ma'am. Just one thing. So Monday, I attended a peaceful protest up at Cooper Street Rec Center in Port Charlotte, and I did that because Northport is a very close community member to Port Charlotte, and as you know, there's going to be a Black Lives Matter march up in Lashley Park this Friday, and the organizers of that. Called together the police chief of Punta Gorda, Chief Davis, Sheriff Brummel, Commissioner Bill Truex was there, and I had asked him if it would be all right if I go, because we have this close community, and about whatever would happen in Port Charlotte will always bleed into our neighborhood because we're so close in a relation to them. And as such, I will tell you, it turned out to be just a phenomenal thing. There's probably about 150 or so people showed up, and I'm going to tell you, there was a lot of frustration shown there, but there was also a lot of solidarity brought out of that. And I want to thank our city manager and our chief of police as we are setting up with a lot of these groups that are organizing these things to come together and to speak together now, while things are still peaceful over in this section, obviously, and to have communication and see what we can do to help in these situations like this. There's been some great tragedies on all sides here, and I think, whenever we have an open ear to listen, that's always a plus. And so I want to thank them for that. So that will be, they'll be scheduling that with myself and them. And I'm sure as we move forward with this, there'll be more information coming to you guys with anything that has to do to address us as a board. So I just wanted that to be out there. I want folks that are listening to know with the city of Northport. And if you guys want to weigh in on it, we stand with all people. We are one people in America, and so So anyways, I just wanted to bring that up, that is happening, that we are going to be meeting with them, and that the event, I pray the event this Friday will be exactly as it says, peaceful. And the one I attended was phenomenal. It really turned out to be phenomenal. And so I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanks. Commissioner Emmerich, do you have anything?
The only thing I have is I would like to say a very heartfelt thank you to Ms. Nicole and Ms. Balia on all of their hard work on putting this neighborhood revitalization plan together. And I would also like to thank this board for making it come to fruition. It's been a long battle trying to get this fixed, and I just want to thank you all very much. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Emmerich. I only have 2 items. I too got the email about the FLC committee meetings. That's actually going to be done before the election. And I know in years past, we always got board approval for each of us to be on the board. So I sent it to city manager, not knowing if it's an automatic agenda item or not. So he is going to be creating an agenda item for future discussion so that we can formally be put on the boards. I would assume we're all going to be on the same boards that we were last year, but I don't want to assume either. So keeping it clean, he is going to be creating an agenda item probably this month or early next month, because those discussions start, I think, in August or some. Anyways, the other question that I have, and I do want to have a conversation about this. City Hall is still closed. And the phase 2 of reopening Florida happens tomorrow. Grocery stores have been open to 100% capacity. People can congregate in groups of 10 or less. Right now, starting tomorrow, it can go up to 50 or less. Churches social distance to have their services. I am wondering too, just like the citizens, when will City Hall be open and when will chambers be open? Because I'm seeing a distinction between City Hall and chambers. And I'm wondering, when will chambers and City Hall be open to the citizens? And I'm hoping city manager may have an answer for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the anticipated reopening date is June 16th or 15th, actually, for City Hall. We have a meeting scheduled that day that will still be a Zoom meeting because we had to get the notices out. As you know, that's the continuance of the 7-Eleven item, for lack of a better term. So since we had to get that out, had to make a decision, and also hopefully avoid any more potential issues, that will be a Zoom meeting, just like this one is, and just like the first effort at it was as well. The next day, we have budget workshops. Those will be in the chambers, but as we talked when we first went into this, we'll come out of it the way we went into it, in a phased approach. So those budget
you broke up in a what?
In a phased approach. So as you probably remember, when all this COVID stuff started happening, we had a commission meeting where the commission was live in the building, and the public was able to attend virtually. Public comment. We will be doing that for the 16th, 17th, and 18th meetings. And I believe that's our plan for the June 23rd meeting as well. And then in July, the plan is to start live meetings. The public will be welcome back into the chambers as well. By that time, we will have, the state should be out of all the phases, be reopened. That's the plan. Yes, the governor did just announce yesterday that the plan is, or that the state is going to be entering phase 2 effective Friday. Unfortunately, he waited until yesterday to do that. And sometimes we have to notice things with a certain amount of time in advance. So in order to start getting things in place, our plan to answer all your questions, is City Hall opening on the 15th, live meetings with the public in chambers starting in July.
And Mayor, if I may also, in yesterday's order, the governor included a reference to his emergency order, executive order 20-69, which is the order that allows us to do the meetings virtually by communications media technology. And he specifically indicated that that order would be extended through June 30th.
So that's a governor's order that we have to conduct our commission meetings virtually until June 30th?
No, ma'am, it's not a requirement. It's the governor's order that allows us to do that.
Okay, so
and he has extended that order through June 20th. I'm sorry, June 30th by reference in yesterday's order. It's at the very end of the order.
Okay. So I'm going to put it out on the record, and I'll just let everybody else weigh in. I really feel that chambers should be open on the 16th. The agendas have not posted yet, so we can still have a live in chambers meeting back to normal. We can social distance in chambers and have 50 people in chambers. Based on past experience, we don't have but maybe 15 people anyhow attending the workshops for budget. But that's their choice to come or not. And I think that having chambers closed is sending a horrible message. When people can go out and about and in groups of 50 or less starting tomorrow, but they cannot come into a commission meeting. I have a problem with that, and I would like to see if we can open up the chambers to the citizens with the required social distancing, with the required maximum capacity of groups of 50 or more, 50 or less, starting with the budget workshops. I don't see anything that's preventing us from doing that. And if somebody could help me understand what would prevent us from doing that, if it's going in and marking chairs, I will be more than happy to do that tonight on my own time.
May I comment to it?
Absolutely, Vice Mayor.
I don't mind agreeing with that, but I would hate to say, here's this 50 and there was 52 people wanting in. I mean, because between staff and us, there's quite a few right there. So I would hate to say to citizens, yeah, that one can come in and you can't. That's the only downfall I see with it.
It happens at restaurants, first come, first serve. You know, if they reach their capacity for that 25%, they have to wait until somebody leaves.
Mayor, I understand that that's how it works with restaurants. We're not to say, I don't agree you can compare us to the restaurant. We fall under laws that restaurants don't have to follow.
No, I get that.
And you're going to have somebody that if they get turned away, we're going to have a problem.
Yes, ma'am, if I may, if the city were to reopen meetings for full public participation under the governor's order, just off the cuff, my first concern would be exactly what the city managers pointed out. I think that we would need to figure out how to accommodate the same number of persons that we accommodate in chambers and in overflow in designated areas that can hold 50 at a time, until it's the maximum. That could be separate rooms, that could be broadcasting it out on the city green, with chairs set up. I'm not sure what all that might look like, or even what options the city manager's team could accommodate. But it would not be as simple as just opening one room and saying first come, first serve. And after that, you have to go on the web.
But if we had the room, 244 can be used for overflow if you have more than 50 people in chambers.
Yes, ma'am, it can. But I don't know what other rooms we would use for the extra overflow, because I don't know the capacity in chambers. I would expect that it exceeds 100, probably. I'm not very good at estimating numbers by looking at.
I believe it's a 200 and something.
Okay, and then 244. I don't know the number there either, but I know it's posted on the wall, and the fire chief probably knows.
You can see there's 60 to 80 something in that room.
All right, so let's say 300. That's attorney math. We would need to figure out then how to, accommodate at least that many people. And at times when we have known that we were going to have more than what would be capacity for those 2 rooms at City Hall, I believe there have been an instance or 2 where we have scheduled the meeting at different locations. Someone can correct me if that's wrong.
And,
so there are some. I'm not saying that it can't be done, Mayor, or any other commissioners who might be interested in going that direction, but I am saying that it's not necessarily a simple thing to do, and it is something that we would need to look at from a legal perspective and also from just a practical perspective of how to achieve what we would need to do to stay in compliance to ensure the public the ability to participate in the meeting to meet the requirements under the law.
I understand. I do understand that. I just think it can be done, and citizens, they can choose to come to the meetings just like they did before COVID even hit, or they can choose not to. I cannot remember the last time that we had over 100 people or even needed to use overflow, except for that utilities building discussion. That one was crazy, and that one, we expected that to happen. I don't see anything. Go ahead, City Manager.
Mayor, I can tell you the last time we did have a packed house and a packed overflow room was last year's budget hearings.
Right, but it was the hearings, it wasn't the workshops.
Yes, and we encouraged them all at that hearing to start coming to the workshops.
Right.
Not whether they would overfill the chambers with 50 people and then the overflow room with another 50. As the city attorney was just stating, we got to accommodate the amount of people we normally can accommodate, not the limited amount. And so if 300 people show up and we only have the room for 100, we have to find a room for those other 200 or else we have a problem. And right now, I don't have the ability to do that in this building. To be able to have them see the meeting, have a place to be in groups of 50 or smaller, and get public comment so they can all come into a room. It's just a logistical problem that we're not prepared for. I understand the concern, and believe me, nobody wants to get back to normal business than I do. You and I have talked about that more. I want this done.
I just see a very horrible message going to our citizens that, hey, City Hall's opening on Monday, but no, you can't come to the meetings. And that's not one I am comfortable with. I think that while your concerns that you're expressing about making accommodations for them to come to meetings, if we were to open up the chambers for the citizens, I think keeping it closed creates just as many legal issues on the other end of the spectrum. So I said my piece. I don't know if anybody, oh, Vice Mayor, your hand is up. Thank you.
Yeah, but we did that very thing going into this. I mean, I remember all of us going up there, we were 6 foot apart. And if somebody wanted to, well, it might end up being one going out of it too. You don't know. But we did it going into it. And as the city manager said, we're reversing the process going out. I am one, because of operating business the way that I have, I'm very protective legally. And I wouldn't want, because there's probably going to be lots of people coming to this budget. I mean, lots. I mean, they're inflamed over budget, have been for a year and a half, probably. So I wouldn't want to leave anybody aside and run that risk of jeopardizing ourselves. I would rather they still remotely come in as we distance ourselves, and then when the cap is lifted off for us to accommodate everybody, be able to put them all in.
All right. Well, I honestly think that a lot of people are social distancing themselves and still isolating themselves and not going out and venturing out as much as if it would be if we did not have COVID. That's a totally different thing. I think that there is space to accommodate the 100 people that may more than likely not show up. between 244, which will allow 50 people, and then Chambers, which will allow 50 people. So because city manager said that Chambers would probably not open until at least June 23rd or until July. Any emails I get, city manager, I'm forwarding them to you.
Sounds good.
Anybody else? All right, so we will move on to administrative reports. City manager.
I've had plenty of comments already. Thank you.
Thank you. City attorney.
I have nothing today, Mayor.
And city clerk?
I have nothing.
Fantastic. Hey guys, it's 4:10. We are officially adjourned. Thanks for the great meeting.
Thank you.